Okay, we are live. I'll call the meeting to order. It's 9:30. First, I'll get our spiel from the clerk.
Thank you, Worship. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the August 26th Committee of the Whole meeting. I'm Jennifer Connor, Clerk of Ramara Township. I'll begin with roll call of council. Mayor Clark.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Bell.
Present.
Councillor Snutch.
Present.
Councillor Fisher.
Present.
Councillor Tuyu.
Present.
Councillor Goff.
Present.
Councillor Bell. Thank you.
Present.
This meeting is being streamed live on the Township of Ramara YouTube channel. Be advised that by attending a public meeting of the Committee of the Whole of the Township of Ramara, you are consenting to your image, voice, and comments being recorded, and they will form part of the recording. The chair, CAO, and/or clerk have the discretion and authority to terminate or interrupt the live streaming in exceptional circumstances where the content of debate is considered inappropriate to be published. Attendees are advised that they may be subject to legal action if their actions result in inappropriate behavior and/or comments.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to start out by introducing, we have a new bylaw enforcement officer with the township now, Zach Clark, and I'll remind everybody it's Clark without an E. So we're not in any way related. He's got over 15 years experience, 14 of them at the city of Oshawa. So you're a certified bylaw officer and a certified property standard officer. Welcome to the township. Anything you want to say, Zach? Okay, well, welcome. That's the easiest file you'll ever deal with here in Ramara. So do I have a disclosure of pecuniary interest by any member of council? And this is for the committee of the whole agenda, correct? Yes. Not seeing any. So then I would look for deputations and presentations. We have none. Administration and finance, Councillor Snutch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have 4 items on the agenda today. The first item is the mid-year report, financial and priorities update. Recommendation that we receive report 80-17-24 regarding the Township of Ramara mid-year priorities and financial review as information. And at this point, I will turn it over to Manon.
Thank you. So to do the mid-year review, we kept the presentation similar to the budget itself, just for consistency and be able to follow from what was originally presented as the budget. So we're going through a few slides. Next slide, please. This first slide is budget to actual by department. So this includes operation and capital. Typically at mid-year, the capital projects are either not completed or they're completed or the invoice is not in yet. So that's why we see a big difference, especially in the roads department, because that's where we have all those bigger capital projects. Next slide, please. This is the same thing for other departments. So again, there's a big difference between budget to actual due to if there's capital projects. For example, in the bylaw department, we see we're pretty close to being halfway because they only had one capital project that was completed. So that's where we see the big difference. Same for Lagoon City Parks and Waterways. There's a big difference between the actual and the budget because one of the big project was a bridge for just around 700,000, which is not completed when I did print the report. Next slide, please. Budget to actual by type of expenses. This includes, there's a capital there. The first in the table below, the first line is capital, which we're at 10% completed financially. And the other ones are closer to 50%, which is right in line with the budget, except for a few exceptions such as insurance and reserves, because these are insurance we pay once a year and it's already paid for the year, and reserve, we do a journal entry as per budget and then we readjust at year end. So that's why reserve is 100%. Next slide, please. Capital budget versus again. Okay, so we go through only the capital portion. As you can see, the actual are really low compared to budget, but in the following months, projects will be completed and paid. Next slide, please. Here are a few highlights of the capital projects, and I added some comments that were provided by directors, just to give you an idea of where we're at. Unless you have any question, I'll just keep going to the next slide. Next slide, please. Salaries and wages by department. We are pretty close to the 50% mark, which is to be expected. Nothing major that I can remember. In administration, we are a little bit, if I remember correctly, we're just a little bit over the 50%. We had a lot of staff changes from when we first did the budget to what's actually going on. So we had to replace some staff. There's some sick leave versus staff replacing, which at year end, I'm expecting to be a little bit over budget in wages for administration finance. Next slide, please. Taxes receivable. So 2021 to 2023, this is the amount receivable at year end. We're close to, it's pretty stable, going down a little bit. 2024 is looking higher right now because we still have an installment that is due end of September. So when that installment is due and paid, we should be pretty close to where we're at in the previous years. Next slide. Reserve balance. We've talked about this before. Reserve went really, not really high, but higher during COVID because of all the projects that were delayed. So we were budgeting for projects that we couldn't do. That's why the reserve went up. And there was also some contribution to reserve. And then in 2022, 2023, and 2024, we've been catching on projects. But unfortunately, the cost of the projects have increased quite significantly. So that has a big impact on our reserves.
Dave?
Yeah, go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
To the chair. I am concerned going into the next page, which I think we're going into, but looking at this chart is very helpful. Next year, 2025 capital expenses are quite a bit more than what we actually have in reserves now. So do we have any idea of what is going to be going into reserves at the end of this year to top it up for next year?
We don't, because whatever was as per budget, it's already done, as presented before. So we had, I believe we have 150,000 in the fire department, 18,000 or a little bit more in administration. And I don't think we had any in roads, eh? No, I don't think we had any. So this was already, it's already part of the graph. If there's more at year end, it depends what happened during the year. So all those capital projects that we still don't have paid for, and this will be, if any of those projects are either not completed or under budget, then it will become a surplus at year end and will go back in reserve.
So, but right now, we're only looking at about $150,000 added.
It's already in there. Yeah.
It's already
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So that's a major concern. And I guess we'll get on to that, but I think that we need to have some kind of a plan because the next year is another 6 million.
Yeah.
And so we're at not in a good spot right now.
It's getting low. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Yeah.
I have a question myself. Going back to the taxes receivable,
Yes.
2021 is higher than all the years on here. Is there any specific problem with 21, or is there something you can talk about? But why are those coming up to 3 or 4 years old?
That's the taxes receivable at year end in 2021. It doesn't mean they are still
Oh.
receivable.
Sorry, say that again.
It's probably not receivable anymore because we go on tax sale after 2 years of being unpaid. But the balance you see on the table is what was receivable at the end of that year. So December 31st, 2021.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, continue, please.
Where we reserve. Okay. So this slide was added after a question at the last meeting. This is really high level, just to give you an idea of the two major components of our capital budgets, which is fire and roads. We don't have a 10-year capital plan for the other departments, but I feel like those two are where most of the money goes. So it gives us a good idea of where we're at and what impact it could have on our reserves. So I did a high level capital budget for roads and fire. And if you compare those amounts to what was presented as a 10-year capital plan, you'll see some discrepancy because I added a type of inflation to it, where the 10-year capital plan was based on today's cost. So because we're projecting in the future, I thought it would be better to add some inflation to it. So the cost is different from what you've seen in a previous report, but that's where the difference comes from. So, and I also added some contingencies because even if I inflate it, it's really hard to know how it will cost. So just to give us a little idea of our needs. So the contribution to reserve is, I think this is where we should go from now on to build back our reserve. So we're just investing in reserve every year to try and build up. And so the top portion is how much it would cost for those two departments. And the bottom portion is how we would fund it. So I went on an average of how much taxation was used in the past for capital projects in those two departments. And I also inflated that taxation component. And then I did an average of how much grant we've used in the past. And the balance would be funded through reserve because that's where our money comes from, right? It's taxation grants and reserve mostly. And the bottom line, the bottom section is the balance of our reserve, less the amount that are either already committed or that we can touch. We have some reserve funds that are for specific purpose. So we can't just use it because we need it. It has to be like such as development charges. And we have some grants that would put aside that are for specific purpose. So I have to take it out of the equation. And the balance of the available reserve is the total amount, which is 3.3 million. So next slide, please. So this is a summary of our financial situation as a whole in mid-year. So overall, we're pretty much on track with budget. There's a few items that were not part of the budget. So we have that hauling situation that we'll discuss on another report. We do have some savings on insurance cost. When we did the budget, we were using last year's cost of insurance and inflated because insurance always go up quite significantly. But we looked at switching to another insurance company, and I did manage to get a revised quote from our current insurance company, and So we have some savings there due to that. And we have some investment that were called in with a nice interest rate. So these were not part of the budget. So that's additional revenues we were not expecting. So that's good news. As mentioned before, we had a lot of staff changes in 2024. We're trying to minimize the impact on budget, but we still have to maintain our services and be able to function. So we did, and we still do need to hire some replacement. We had bad news about a week ago. The Housing Enabling Water System Fund grant was denied. So we had originally applied for Ramara Road, right? Yeah, and unfortunately we didn't get it. Another point that will be discussed later today is the accounts receivable. This was flagged during the audit process, and it was a request to bring back a report. So it will be discussed later. And as mentioned, the reserve balance are getting low.
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
So on the insurance, we're still going to participate in the pool at county. I think it's next year. That one is coming available.
We are part of the pilot project.
Yeah.
And the intent is to be part of it, yes, when it does
Thank you.
happen.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you. I have 5 questions, so if that's okay, I'll just go through them one
That's
after
fine.
the other. So on the first one, and this is just for information for the public who might be watching, on budget to actuals, we have the section called other. So could you just explain what items are captured in that, in other? Sorry, 6 questions. It's page 5 or page 4. Yeah, page 5, I think. But for us, and so I
On
wasn't
the
sure how the
budget to
notes were
actual
coming
by expense, you mean? The one with a graph and a table on the bottom? Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So it's whatever was left that didn't fit into the other categories. So it could be, let me see. Materials, it could be memberships and training, and it could be software, any type of expense that doesn't fit in the other one. So instead of having multiple lines, we just combine everything into other.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then on that same slide, and I know that we still have a number of outstanding salaries, easy for me to say, but on the recreation and the bylaw specifically, the numbers are quite, the disparity is quite large. So the recreation has tons of budget left, whereas bylaw is almost at the end of their budget, but we still have quite a few months to go. So
Yes.
I'm just not sure what's going on there.
Okay, so recreation, when we did the budget, it's mostly related to the camps, the summer camps. So they were planning on hiring some more specialized staff to supervise the camp staff, and that didn't happen. And we are also short one camp staff, I believe, we have junior camp staff and camp staff. I think we're short in both.
Okay,
So we hired less students that we were anticipating.
perfect. Thank you. And then
Whereas bylaw, all the students were hired, and the summer is almost over. So those extra wages are taking more. That's why it looks like it's higher than 50%.
perfect. Thank you. Okay, the next one is on page 6, and it's the budget to actuals by expense. And then it shows the debt and interest, 727.8. And does that debt then include the servicing, Brecken servicing? Is that part of that wastewater debt, or is that where that's reflected?
Which line is that?
Page 6, budget to actuals by expense. There's a little chart.
Oh, okay. Debt and interest are recorded at year end, so that's why it's not showing right now.
Okay,
So
but
that's a journal entry we do at year end.
okay, but that would include the sewer debt then?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
All the debts, yes.
Okay. I guess because it just doesn't show how much is the sewer debt and then how it's being paid back. So that's a
Yeah.
question that residents have asked. So we can address that later then. Page 8. There's I would wonder if we could compare page 8 to slide 14 of our actual 2024 budget. So when you open up slide 14, in the 2024 budget, it gives specific deliverables with a budgeted cost. And then we haven't, like, I don't know where we are with any of those. So for example, did we implement the camera system in the Bates room for 4,500? The budgeting software, we had allocated 14,800, and I don't know whether you've used that 14,800 or are you still looking for budgeting software? Because then that comes up again in our strategic priorities and it talks about improving that. And I know, I remember during discussion, you were only able to buy kind of the base level of the software.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if that 14,800 represents that. And then
Yes.
it does. So,
Yeah.
and that's okay. So
So,
there's a few items on that slide. So that's what I was
Yeah.
wondering if we could just compare that slide.
well, there's the 2024 capital project highlights. These are the highlights, right? So I think I went 100 and over. So that we wouldn't have like pages and pages of projects. But yeah, the camera system is done, the budgeting system. Oh, okay. Okay. The camera system's done, the budgeting software, you're right. We went with the basic one and we are implementing it. So the amount is used, but I'm starting to enter budget in it. I'm just not convinced, that for 2025, I won't need my Excel spreadsheet still, like it's still in process.
That's why I was asking actually, because just as we're coming up to budget, just to understand whether that software is going to work or because if it's not, then I just would think it was something we would talk about when we get to budget time.
Yes.
You're looking for productivity, reduced errors, ability to pull more data, all the things that would,
Yeah.
so that's why I was curious about that. I think on the specialized equipment, Fire's made its purchases. And then I know once we revisited the sunshade and I'm not sure where we are with that. So we had budgeted 15,000 and I don't know if we've implemented the sunshade. I haven't seen it myself, but I didn't specifically look. So there's just a couple of things. And then there was the purchase of a van for bylaw. And I'm not sure whether that happened either.
Yeah, if council wants a report on every capital projects, we can come back with this, but I think the goal of the mid-year review was to go like a higher level. So that's why I stopped at about 100,000. But if it's needed, I can come back with a report on every capital project.
No, it wasn't every
Yeah.
capital. It's just these are the project highlights that are in our actual budget. So
Yeah.
that's the only reason I was asking about these ones. So we could have a comparative to know because it just helps us know whether we need to think about those in a month when we start budget discussions. That's all. So
Okay.
that's why I was curious.
Okay.
So, okay, that's fine. The next one is just an explanation. On page 10, you have the properties that are registered for tax sale at 41, but then only 3 properties are scheduled to be sold this year. So this is more of just an explanation so people would understand why do we have 41, but we're only going to attempt to sell 3.
Yeah, well, because when we register property, the last thing we want to do is to actually go with a sale. So we send tons of notices and it's a big process and with deadlines and legislation to follow. So there's a lot of back and forth with the property owners, and we always hope that we can come up with a full payment and not get to tax sale. So that's the good news. When we have 41 properties that are registered from tax sale and 3 that are actually going for tax sale, this is good news. This is what we want. We don't want to sell people's property. That's not the goal at all.
Perfect. That's all. Thank you. I just wanted the explanation so people would understand. And that was the end of my question. So thank you very much.
That's it for me.
Okay. Let me get back to the agenda here.
Would you like to go through the priorities? I can just go through it quickly,
Yeah.
all the different priorities and kind of what we set, and then kind of our status with each one of those.
Okay.
So back in 2023, we went through our strategic plan. So the strategic plan was for 2023 to 2026. Through that strategic plan, we created 4 strategic priorities. So that's the service excellence, sustainable infrastructure, community connection, and strategic growth. And then from there, we created a work plan as well as the 2024 initiatives from that work plan. As you'll see above, these are all the different things that was set aside just to get completed this year. And then as you can see from this table, we're either in the process of completing, have completed, and then there's just one that's going to be moved to 2025, just because within that department, they just would like to have a few more individuals in the department so they can really look at it at a holistic level, especially after that recreation master plan. That recreation master plan will give some insight into the special event strategy and policy. So looking at a deeper dive into each one, so we've categorized it within each priority level. So when we look at service excellence in the implementation of innovative attraction and retention strategies. So as you saw with the CAO recruitment, we created the one little video. This is in relation just for full-time staff, and there'll be a second recruitment video focused on both the summer seasonal and part-time staff. So next year, when we're looking at the camp staff bylaw infrastructure, we'll have that video ready for that. The next is looking at training and development opportunities for both staff and council. So far this year, there's been a lot of different opportunities. We also connect with the county of Simcoe and a lot of the opportunities that they provide, and staff either complete those virtually or they go there in person. We're in the process of completing an organizational review. So that is a 3-phase process. First phase was presented to council at the last council meeting in closed session. Phase 2 will be presented today, and then the third phase presented next month. Looking at the financial data comparative study. So this is one of our treasurer's projects. And this provides both a comparative study of looking at what other municipalities' financial conditions. So when our treasurer's looking at different decisions, they can look at things at a comparative level and different indicators that other municipalities have as well. Implementing budgeting software. So we were talking about that as well as Office 365. And as Mano just provided that update. So she's in the process of implementing that budget software, but for the 2025 budget, she'll be using both the budgeting software and Excel. And we're all very excited as staff to use that software. And then Office 365. So in the process of getting that as well. So the migration from Mail and 365 will be done in October, and then the rest of the process will be migrated over. The completion process for filling Ward 4 vacancy, as we know, that is completed with Councillor Goff filling the Ward 4 vacancy. And then continue to grow services and access to online services. So next month we'll be launching that remote meter reading system for those on the water and wastewater users, as well as staff are always looking at ways to integrate payment options into online forms and creating options for the forms that we do have, where a lot of people have to come in person, having that online version for residents to be able to fill that out online at their own leisure. So it would be available 24/7, 365. The next part is that we get into sustainable infrastructure. So updated and maintain the asset management plan that was presented at the July Committee of the Whole meeting, the asset management plan for non-core assets, and ratified at the July 22nd, 2004 meeting. The investigate implement asset retirement obligations. So staff have completed the requirement for 2023, and then future liability costs are going to be recorded as per that ARO policy. Updating engineer design guidelines. I believe the guidelines are 13 years old. And so at this point, staff are in the process of working together. So that is with planning, building, as well as infrastructure, and getting those design guidelines updated. Develop a water and sewer servicing plan. So at this point, the South Ramara servicing plan with the engineers are being finalized. And then in 2025, the athlete servicing study would then be completed. initiating the water wastewater services expansion. So as many discussions have occurred, one of those is that Lakeshore, Lone Birch Ridge, and Maple Trail. So in the process of it being with the design, getting the design completed with the engineers, and it will be brought back here to council. And then complete a water and wastewater rate study. So that was done earlier this year with the rates being implemented for July 1st until December 31st of 2024, with it coming back to council for further discussions. And then we look at community connections. So looking at acquiring data, engage community activity, investigating new systems, so on and so forth. So as we do various consultations with the community, it's my job to look at, okay, what is that data that we're getting? What is it that the public wants to see as something different, or new tools that are being launched through various platforms? So looking at how we can utilize those. One of the things that we usually did was a Ramara bulletin. It went out every month and it went in the paper. So looking at how that visual tool can then maybe be in a written component. So every month I do a written component, and it's almost like a newsletter style for internal staff of kind of what is happening. So that way everyone is on the same page of different things getting implemented. So looking at that kind of style as the Ramara bulletin going forward. So that way people have a blurb rather than just maybe a visual on what is happening each month, or things that they need to be aware of. As I mentioned before, the special event strategy and policy will be brought forward back in 2025. The Parks and Recreation plans, so the community consultation as well as those interviews have been completed. And Landscape, who was retained earlier this year, will then bring forward a update as well as the plan I want to say later in the fall to council. Monitoring the community needs and communicate emergency preparedness and safety. So this is done through our fire and rescue services. Not only do they do outstanding social media, they go into the schools, they attend various events, but they're always working to update so that they reflect on what is happening within the community, as well as they're in the process of finishing the community risk assessment, that CRA, in conjunction with the fire master plan that was presented a couple of years ago. And then we look at strategic growth. So completing the official plan, that public meeting was done at the August 12th meeting, and then another public meeting is set forward. And then hopefully it can come to council and we can get it ratified. And then afterwards it goes to the County of Simcoe for final approval. Complete the Lake St. John flooding map. So this is done now. And that was through the MNRF. That was a grant that we received to pay for 50% of the project and was completed by March 2024. And lastly, we have the community improvement plan and urban design guidelines. So the streetscape design is completed and the CIP is just in the process of getting completed, and working with partners to identify opportunities, enhance tourism and business attraction. So this is where we work with a lot of our different partners. So whether it's the County of Simcoe ECDEV department, Simcoe County Tourism, the Chamber of Commerce, we have a thing called Little R Economic Development Committee, and that is with the Township of Severn, Ormadonte, the City of Aurelia, and Rama, and we get together about quarterly to discuss like kind of what Kuchiching kind of area, what are the different initiatives that they're having. And then lastly, in 2023, we're working on a video for more of that winter tourism. We're only able to get the half of the video completed because every time we went to go do something, we either had no snow or it was raining or something would happen. So we're just going to complete that project hopefully at the end of 2024, if not 2025. And that was financed through a grant as well. And the grant we were able to move it to a future date, which is great as well. And then that is it from me.
Thank you. Did we have a mover and a seconder on that? So you want to ask a question or you want okay. Councillor Goff and the mayor. Any questions? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I do know. Actually I have, I think in general, just a comment and we're not really using like SMART objectives, right? So we don't have any measurables. So I noticed things like staff are looking at or staff are evaluating, but that's not a measurable goal. So looking at doesn't say to me that and I'll just use an example. We looked at 5 online platforms to improve our report of concern, for example, and then we evaluated those 5 and we made a decision to do X. So I think just generally speaking, moving forward, our work plan for the year should be strategic and there should be measurable goals set, because right now at mid-year, it would be hard to say if we're achieving any measurables, and I understand we're achieving things, but there's no way to know what we've achieved because there's no SMART goals in it. So that would just be a general comment that I would hope when we produce a work plan for 25, we would be able to set actual measurable goals and timelines that would help us be able to evaluate whether we're achieving. So that was just my general comment. And then I do have just a couple of questions. So I just want to confirm the financial data comparative study. This is not something we've received and it's still in progress, because I don't recall receiving it, or if we did, I didn't recognize it as this.
It is completed. Yeah.
And has council received it, or like we received this report and I just didn't recognize it as this?
No. I wasn't told to bring it to council, but if council wants to see it, I can bring it to the next meeting.
Well, I thought that it was, I mean, it's an important study, right? Because it compares us to other municipalities. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Like, it's a good tool to use in the future. Every time we review our rates or review how we do stuff, like, it's always a good idea to have some comparables. It's not a study that will say, this township, this is how much they're charging for such a service, but overall, it talks about the population. So I can bring it to council in the next meeting, no problem.
Thank you. We talked about the budgeting software, so that was that one. One of the things that I had been speaking to former CAO Drinkwalter about on the online aspect of things was enhancing our ticketing system. So I'm not sure how, and it was just a general conversation. So just a comment again that maybe for 25 into the work plan, we can talk more about that, just because we still have issues, I think, with like form abandonment, right? If the list is too long, people just scroll right past it or that kind of thing. So just a comment on that as well. Because I'm not sure what online, because we don't have actual measurables here. When you say looking at ways to enhance our online communications or our online whatever, I don't know what it is. So I don't know what we've evaluated. So I don't know whether we've achieved it. So I guess it's just wrapped up in that kind of same, notion of SMART objectives. And then on the community connection aspect, I know you talked about revamping the bulletin so it becomes more of a newsletter, but we don't talk about how we're going to distribute it. So part of the problem is that the online method only is not reaching enough of our publics. So I just wonder if there's more to it than that, and there's going to actually be a strategy about how you're going to distribute it, or are we going to offer the opportunity for people to sign up to receive it by good old fashioned snail mail if that's what they choose. And then I guess the other thing is moving the special event strategy to 25 means that I don't know what it means, but I'm curious whether it means there will be no community events again in 2025. So that would be concerning just as we come into budget discussions. We haven't held a community event in a long time. So pushing it again till 26, we're just not serving our residents. The Parks and Rec Master Plan, I am confused by why we're rushing it with only 6 weeks of engagement. I know many residents still don't even know that we did it because it's again just being pushed out in an online format. And I know you tried to bring it into the community centers and that sort of thing, but I think the month of July is probably the worst time of year to try to engage people because they want to be outside on the trails, at the parks and on the beach. And when I'm comparing to other communities, I'm finding much longer time periods, especially for something like the Master Rec Plan, which is 12 years, a gap between when we did the last and this one. I know that our population hasn't changed drastically. And so, but I know that we need to update it. And I'm just concerned that we're rushing it through in such a fast manner. And I guess again, on those lines, I've started to do my own research on recreation. And there's 38 or 39 municipalities between 9,000 and 11,000 people. I'm up to number 11, comparing what we offer and what they offer. And up to that 11, just for an example, they all have a Canada Day. We don't. So,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. What did you say? They have a what?
a Canada Day celebration
Thank
that's
you.
municipally supported. So, and we don't. So I'm 11 for 11 right now, and I would probably hazard to say quite a few more are going to have a Canada Day celebration. So just this whole notion of pushing everything until, you know, we're not going to deal with it in 25. I hear that, but I just think in the 25 year, we should be trying to find a way to do something. And I know we're going to have a presentation about yesteryears, and that's great. But I think, you know, we for a long time have pushed off doing any kind of community events, and we're way behind. All those 11 municipalities, way behind. So I'm concerned about that. And then just on the fire, the whole emergency fire prevention, that piece of it, I know that we go into the schools, and I know the library's been doing touch truck and that sort of thing. But again, there we are, you know, we're lagging behind all the surrounding communities. They have the coffee with a cop, or I've noticed that a lot of them are bringing in a police officer as well as a fire representative from the fire emergency services. So it's kind of two birds with one stone, and they're open house style sessions. And in my own dealings with the OPP, for example, they have talked a lot about trying to motivate residents to understand that it's not wrong to call the police, because there's sort of an old fashioned attitude that you'd only call them in an emergency. So I think expanding that would be a good idea too, so that we are out there. And I know the residents in Ward 5 have asked for it. We just haven't been able to facilitate at the community center. So those are just kind of some comments on, I don't know, when we start looking at the next work plan. And I think it's important to note that now, because I can see those things that we would want to start moving into in 25. Yeah, and I notice that there's not a lot of comparison between our 18 to 23 economic development plan and the strategic growth that's here. So that economic development plan has 5 strategic priorities in it, and there's a number of actionable items within each of those 5 priorities. And this strategic growth piece doesn't, the two don't speak to each other. So that would be, again, just kind of falling into how do we do a work plan and how do we set our objectives.
You're
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm just curious, we're now giving direction to staff for day-to-day operations. I'm just wondering if there's a staff report you're looking for that would.
Excuse me, a point of order is to the chair. So it's up to Dave to determine on the point of order. That's how, so that we have a point of order. Dave, you're chairing, you have to determine.
Why don't we go halfway and sort of wrap this up, because we should be voting on what we give to council to do. But I also would like, I know CEO, Mr. Dunn wants to speak too. So maybe if we could just wrap up a summary or something that we can get ready to move on.
Thank you. Yes, those were my comments, and that was my comments on the presentation. I wasn't giving any direction, and I didn't request any staff reports. I was merely making comments on the process, and it's not answering any of my questions, I guess. It's answering some of my questions, but in a very general way. So it's not providing real data that can help us make good decisions. So that's really all I wanted to say. And it's not a reflection on staff. It's just a process enhancement or improvement, the way that we can enhance how we're doing our work plans.
Okay, thank you. CEO, Mr. Dunn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, to Councillor Bell. You raised a number of questions through your presentation. Would you please bring up slide number 5? Ashley, if you can present slide number 5. Councillor, this is at 1,000 feet. And to your point about the granularity of how and what was identified as far as key performance indicators for, that was the slide. Yes, right there, please. The key performance indicators for each one of those items, the direction from council during budget and striking the strategic plan, that was not what was being unpacked today. High level, here's where we are mid-year in conjunction with the presentation from the treasurer on the status from a finance perspective. What I would say is, Councillor Bell, you raised a number of very good questions for consideration. Mr. Mayor, to you, through the chair, It would be on direction of council on the next iteration of these things, should council wish to have more granularity and specific metrics. But I can tell you in my career, through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Bell, it's easy to say that there will be key performance indicators. The challenge is getting the right ones, managing them, and reporting on a regular cycle. I would just caution whoever my replacement will be to not run, but to walk and make sure that the foundation is there. Some of the data is there. Again, really good questions posed by Councillor Bell. Mr. Chairman, understand many of these things will be folded into the next cycle with council, starting with a budget update on October the 23rd or 5th. Or the 24th. So somewhere in between there, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead. We'll go to Councillor 2 first and then Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. Through the chair, I have what I think is a pretty broad general question, possibly for our GIS expert planner, Jen Stong. On slide 18, it said complete the Lake St. John flood mapping project. And it does say, I know that we are still in the middle of finalizing our draft official plan review, but it states here that the project for the flood mapping was completed in March 2024 with mapping and information submitted to the ministry. I'm just wondering, have we got access to that mapping yet? I know that a lot of people in low-lying areas have never been sure if they are technically within a floodplain or not, and having that kind of label has been known to not necessarily be helpful in terms of home insurance or resale value. So I'm just wondering if there's a way that the residents can access that map.
And Waleed will, Jen is coming on. I can let Jen speak to it.
Sure. Yes, I can speak to the flood mapping. So we do have it on our GIS right now. It will go on as a schedule in the OP. Anybody can call in and ask for the mapping. I just don't have it on the public side yet. There's some overlap between the Black River and the Lake St. John. So we just want to put those two shape files together so that they are not misleading. And then we'll put them onto the GIS mapping.
Thank you.
Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. Through you to Ashley. I just would like you to, because I can confirm this, and I think every member of council can, in the slides that were presented, if people were to go back and watch the presentation that was presented versus what we have in the agenda that we downloaded, it looks slightly different. And I think it's just because the font size is different. So some of the sides, they just don't fit the same way. So I just want you to confirm that the information that's in the agenda package is the exact same information that when people are watching now or will be watching later is the exact same information, and there hasn't been anything changed.
Yeah, everything's the same.
Yeah, I knew that. I just wanted to make sure that the people knew that too.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. Are there any other questions from council? The request is that we receive this information or receive this report as information or the financial review as information. All in favor? Passed. The next is item 4.2. It's funding for the haulage of the Bayshore Village wastewater effluent hauling. The recommendation is that we direct staff to enter into a loan agreement with our financial institution to finance the cost of haulage effluent from Bayshore spray fields. And can we have someone put that on the floor, please? Councillor Tuyu, thank you, and Councillor Fisher. I guess since it's finance, we'll go back to Manon.
Okay, so at the last meeting, council approved the hauling of the effluent in Bayshore, but it was asked to prepare more information about the current state of the township's reserve and bring it back to council to make a decision on how this hauling would be funded. So basically, the report is the same as it was at the previous meeting, with the two options being to either take on a loan with a financial institution to make sure the funds from the ratepayers versus the taxpayer is divided and clear, Or the other option would be to borrow from our general tax reserve to fund this expense that was not part of the budget.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Councillor Bell.
Thank you. I had attempted to speak to this at the last meeting, so I will try again. I'm concerned about the divisive language. So we have a statement that says the tension seen lately in regards to taxpayers versus ratepayers. So I have had some residents, funnily, thinking they're humorous, ask me if that means they're no longer taxpayers, because that's great, because they'll stop remitting their property tax. So I think that the language taxpayers versus ratepayers is not an acceptable way of defining our publics. We're all taxpayers, in fact. And beyond that, we all have a responsibility for our municipal services. And if we would visit that same 2018 to 25 economic development plan, for example, its number one strategic priority is to invest in municipal services. So I think that I'm very much objecting to the language in the report. So that needs to be said. We need to stop being divisive with our language. And I'm not sure that ratepayers is even a terminology that I would use. Typically, those who use services are consumers of services. So we're all property tax payers, and some of us are consumers of municipal services. And I would appreciate moving forward if we could use that kind of harmonious and unifying terminology versus separating one group as if they aren't taxpayers. So that's just a comment on the language in the report. And then I will say again, as I said last time, we have carried a motion on May 27th that we would provide interest-free loans if necessary. Based on the February 26th report and increase at 8% on water and 5% on sewer, which we know is now wrong. It's defunct. But based on that, when you reach the end of the 8 years, consumers of the services would be paying
Section here, we're trying to talk about fund. I will give my own. Can I give my own? Yeah. So we're not going back into
I'm sorry,
the history.
are you
Here we're
interrupting
trying.
me again? Because you just interrupted me.
Point of order. The chair can interrupt
The
any
point of order is
counselor
on
at
the person
any
who's
time.
doing- No, you don't
The
interrupt
chair
people while
can
they're
interrupt
speaking. It shows no
anybody
decorum
at any
whatsoever.
time if he feels we're off subject. Please respect the chairs when we're in the
Please
council
respect
meeting.
me, because nobody seems to, and that's not
Point of order,
acceptable
the
either.
chair has the floor.
Yeah, we're not going to be rehashing. We're talking here specifically about how we finance this, and we don't need to repeat everything that we've repeated 1,000 times before, which have already had a final resolution and been voted on. So, is any counselor to you? Do you have a question?
Yes, I have two questions, if that's okay. Through you to, I guess, Josh or maybe Manon. On behalf of the residents, I know that you wrote me back regarding my email question, but the report states that if we were to take a loan from our financial institution, that it would be the repayment would be included in the water and wastewater designated ratepayers budget. Can you please absolutely publicly confirm for me that this loan repayment would only be charged to wastewater users and not to water users? I think the water users definitely want to know if they're on the hook for this.
Yes, absolutely. Everything that is related to water and or wastewater is funded by their own funds. We do budget as a whole for water and wastewater, but at the year end, we divide the cost into water and wastewater. So if there's any surplus, it goes back to the individual, not department, but either water or wastewater. Yes.
Thank you. And my second question is it possible to borrow from our general taxpayer reserves, but still pay back the interest, but maybe at a lower rate so that at least the township would be the one to benefit from the loan's interest rather than paying interest to a financial institution? And again, I realize that you had written me back to this already, but again, just for the public who might want to know about this option, I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Sorry, I think Dana's counselor to you. Who are you asking that question to?
To Manon, sorry.
Okay.
Yes, it would be possible to borrow from our general reserve and charge an interest rate. Absolutely. The only concern I have is, well, I have two concerns, is I'm trying to separate the funds between I don't know how to word it now, between general taxation money versus, dedicated user services. To make sure there's no, confusion. So that's one concern. My second concern is the state of our reserve right now. If we had a lot of reserve, I would absolutely say this is a good viable option, but at the current state, we absolutely can. It's just our reserve are getting low and we need to invest in our reserve. So the last thing I want to do is, for people to, think that we're increasing the tax rate in order to support, the water and wastewater budget, which is not the case. We absolutely need to build up our reserve. And this is coming in the 2025 budget.
Thank you. That was helpful.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, and I actually was going to support the counselor's concerns about the divisive language. If we could use general taxpayers versus designated ratepayers, because that's what they're considered in the budget. So if we could, on the next document, it's not taxpayers versus ratepayers, it's general taxpayers versus designated ratepayers, because that's what they're actually categorized as in our budget process. And that clears up the language.
All right, any other questions from council?
Just, I would, it's not versus, we're not one group versus another group. I just think we need to be careful about our language because we're creating a division that perpetuates across the township in different ways. So I don't think we should be using that kind of language. So that was my comment. And my question still is, we passed a motion that said if necessary. And again, we're reaching just shy of $4,000 a year in municipal services at the end of this 8-year study. So when we talk about necessary, I suppose I don't know what necessary means if that amount is going to be higher than most property taxes, right? So I just don't know what if necessary would be defined as, if not defined as we're bankrupting, the consumers of services. So I know what you're all going to do, but I will have my say. So
Well, that's pretty
I don't think
decisive, I would
that,
think.
I don't think that 36
Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
is reasonable.
No, so you'd like a word other than versus? That's what I'm trying to determine. Because I think it has to be mentioned, because a petition did come in to this council from the general taxpayers saying we do not want to fund. That petition came in and we did receive it. So I think it belongs in the document that there is growing tension there. And that's what the document is. Again, it's at that 1,000-foot level that based on the perception of the public and the perception that there's been mismanagement. That's also needs to be said, because that's a perception. We're not agreeing with it. We're not saying it has been mismanaged. We're saying there's a perception of it. So I think it's proper to be, and it needs to be in the document saying, because that has taken place. So I don't know if the CEO has something he wants to add.
Go ahead, Mr. Dunn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. If I could just confirm the concerns raised by Councillor Bell, doubled down by the mayor. Certainly, Ms. Higgins and I will listen to the re-articulation and make sure that it's clear that the language from a staff perspective is not accentuating a division. That's not what that was about. It was a reflection of what was shared with council in open forum and online. So Ms. Higgins, Mr. Kavanaugh, and Dunn will ensure that there is more supportive language that clearly identifies there's two functions, one from a taxpayer perspective and one from a user of municipal services. And as Ms. Higgins indicated, there was also two subgroups, one for water and one for wastewater. So I think Ms. Higgins was very clear, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the recommendation is that we direct staff to enter into a loan agreement with our financial institution to finance the cost of the haulage in the effluent from Bayshore Spray Fields. We have another question on the floor. Go ahead, Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. The repayment of this loan, how many years are we putting this, like how long are we spreading this out until?
Said 5 years.
5 years?
Yeah,
How-
it's part of the report. It
Yeah,
said
so
5
how
years.
would that change if we changed the term? Or do we have the ability to change the term?
I would have to go back to the bank. This is what they proposed to me. I'm assuming the longer we go,
The more money it'll cost.
the
Yep.
interest rate will get higher. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
So is this an open loan? And the reason I say that, when we proceed with the project, I know there's federal funding out there for long-term debentures at a lower interest rate, but I think it's a minimum of 50 million. So I don't know, like, when we go ahead with the project, is there a way to roll this loan into that if we can find a low interest financing available when we proceed with the repair?
Those loan are for infrastructure. This is for maintenance. So I don't believe it would qualify for those types of loans. So that's why we were suggesting going with our financial institution instead of going with Infrastructure Ontario like we did in the past, those debenture you're referring to. So I
So
don't
there's no
believe-
way to combine the two together. That's what I'm saying.
this is an operating expense, so I don't believe it would fit.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bell.
Sorry, thank you. It's just a comment only because we're having council on the same day as committee of the whole. So I can't pull this in advance until we have the discussion. But just for, obviously, I think you already know this, but for a heads up, I will want to pull that item when we get to council this afternoon for a separate recorded vote.
We will make it Schedule B.
I thought we had a rule in place that anything to be pulled was supposed to be presented to staff by Friday at noon. Didn't we have that?
Well, as
How can
Councillor
I
Bell
pull
said,
it?
we're in a combined meeting, so we're gonna do the committee of the whole, then they have to draft up the minutes, so it's gonna come as a separate.
Okay.
She's requesting during committee of the whole, which is perfect. That's what we like to see.
Are there any other questions from council? Mr. Goff.
Thank you, Councillor Snutch. I understand this needs to happen, and I understand that our reserves are being considered low, and we can't afford to pay this through our general reserves. And I understand that we have to actually take out this loan. What I know in some instances, prime, what are we being charged as prime? That's from the bank. Because based on different criteria as to your financial status, you may get not charged 6.7%, which is what prime is. So what is prime that we'd be paying on this loan?
Well, it changes. The day I wrote the report, prime was 4.7, I believe. I would have to go back. So add 0.5 to it. And that's how I came up with the calculation. But I didn't double check today what the prime is. I can and get back to you if you want me to.
No, it's okay. I knew we had talked last meeting that it was 6.7. But I had also read different articles that had said it was lower than 6.7. So
I can look it up and come back. That's not a problem.
no need.
Yeah.
So personally, I would like to use general reserve funding, but I understand that it's not possible to do it. So I'm okay with this.
Any other questions from council? All right. Once again, all in favor of approving that we enter into a loan with our bank for the haulage of the effluent yes, we did. All in favor? That's passed. Okay, the next item 4.3. The Rural Economic Development RED grant update and green and exclusive community building program. The recommendation is that we direct staff to proceed with the Rural Economic Development RED project, and that we direct staff to apply to the Green and Inclusive Community Building program. Can I have someone put that on the floor? Councillor Goff, Councillor Bell. So I guess we should go to Ashley for this to just give us a bit of background.
Yep. So back in, I believe it was end of February, we provided an overview of the different grants that we applied for. So we heard back from the Rural Economic Development Fund in regards to the buildings next door. And as you can see, within the report, it outlines basically what we were approved for. We did, through the 2024 budget process, put away 150,000. So that 150,000 could be used this year to start looking at the structural drawings. Can we see whether those buildings can be moved, so on and so forth, as well as it can be applied for electrical, HVAC, and plumbing to be done with those buildings. So I wanted to provide an update about that project, about the Rural Economic Development Fund. But in the process of doing that, the Green and Inclusive grant came up as well. And I thought it would be advantageous of myself to bring this to your attention, to look at what do we want to do with those buildings next door? Do you want staff to investigate looking at applying for this grant? And so I don't know, and this is the part that I wanted council's recommendation on whether you want staff to look further into the grant. So I'm not sure if it's going to be a new build or a retrofit. So when it comes to a new build, it has to be 30% added to the footprint area. So I would have to look at, okay, what do we want to look at using those buildings for? The grant would be used for community kind of type building, a library. And then if we are going to go forward with that, looking at how much it's going to cost, what type of grant we'd be applying for, whether it's the new build or a retrofit, because then that would determine how much percentage we're going to get. So if it's a new build, we only get 60% of the grant covered, but if it's a retrofit, it's 80%. So that's a part I just would want to work with that grant to see, okay, is this a retrofit? Because maybe we're not expanding that footprint by 30%, but we're moving the buildings. But I wanted council's approval or recommendation to look further into this grant so I can bring it forward maybe at the next meeting so that we can make a decisive decision on whether we want to apply for it or not. It isn't due until October, I'm going to say October 16th, but maybe it's the 15th. So we do have a little bit of time with that.
Okay, questions from council? Sorry, Councillor Goff.
Are you looking for direction from council right now,
Yes.
today?
Looking for direction from council. Do you want staff to look at applying for this grant? And if that is so, then I will go forward and do that. But I didn't want to start looking into something that council said, no, you know what, we don't want to apply for it. So I wanted direction today. So that way we can kind of go forward and really look at what we want to do, whether it's a retrofit, whether it's a new build, roughly kind of what will cost, because that is something I don't know off the top of my head. And then how it can be kind of tied in with that red funding that we already did receive.
Councillor Goff.
It was my understanding that when these buildings were purchased, the plan was to save the facade and actually move the buildings back and create a parking area and a green space there. So I think we should be definitely moving forward. I don't know what it's classified as a new build or a retrofit if that's the process we want to. I guess that'd be something the building department would have to tell us whether it's a new build or whether it's a
that would be working with the grant, just like with the federal, like the advisor, the grant advisor, looking at, okay, this is what we want to do. How does that fit in? And that's why I wanted direction on for staff to investigate, because it takes time. Looking into a grant, it doesn't take a couple hours. It takes days, if not weeks, to really make sure that what we're applying for, we're applying the right cost estimates to, so that way when you do make a decision, we're not just willy-nilly throwing information on paper.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Goff.
Well, I think it would be foolish not to pursue one of these grant windows, right? So,
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I would strongly, when you're working with the board, stress that we do consider it a retrofit if we're moving it. We're not moving them for aesthetics or because we want to move them. It's an MTO requirement. So, we're trying to save the buildings. However, it is an MTO requirement that these buildings be moved back. And then maybe that will help keep it in that retrofit because it's worth an extra 20% to us.
Deputy Mayor Bell.
Yeah, I'll put the motion on the floor that we move forward and apply for the green space.
Yeah, there's two here that we direct staff to proceed with the Rural Economic Development, the RED project, and we direct staff to apply for the Green and Inclusive Community Building Program.
Okay.
All in favor? Passed. Item 4.4, Development Charge Reserve Funds, the annual report. The recommendation is we receive it as information. Manon.
Thank you. So this is a yearly requirement. We need to report on the status of our development charges. Development charges are as the end of the year, December 31st, 2023. And so we're just over 3 million in development charges, plus interest, so 3.4 million. So that's the first table. And then the same amount is split into the different type of development charges. So amounts can only be used for specific purpose. Every year, if we have projects that fit into the development charges study, we can pull from those reserves to fund portion of it. It has to be growth related, meaning that if we were to build a new facility, for example, a recreation facility, if we were to build that, we could pull some of the money in the reserve only for the growth portion. So if we are replacing something that already exists, only the increase in sizes would be eligible for development charges. Any questions?
Councillor Goff.
Yeah, I noticed that you have a water and sewer and Bayshore sewer of $167,500. Can that be used for offset the new build at the new facility that we're building in Bayshore?
No, because it has to be growth related. So Bayshore is not actually growing. That's not why we need to replace the current system. If Bayshore would, for example, double in size and we need a new treatment plant, then yes, we could use it.
Any other questions from council? So if I get back to my motion here, is that we received TR 0824 be received as information. All in favor?
Your worship, we'll need a mover and a seconder for this.
Okay, we have Councillor Goff and Deputy Mayor Bell. All in favor? Passed. Is there any unfinished or new business? Councillor Bell.
Thank you. We're not into reports of boards and committees yet, but I'm bringing this now because it's administrative. We don't receive all of the reports of boards and committees typically, and I'm not sure why we don't receive all of them. So for example, we don't receive the economic development reports. Since fall of last year, the Goose Management Committee has been trying to submit its annual report. So now it would be a 2-year report because we're at the end of the second year. So just administratively, I guess I'm asking when we do this procedure bylaw review that the reports on board and committees is more clearly defined and that we actually receive all reports from all boards and committees. So that was my first sort of
CAO done.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Madam Clerk, you and I are planning to be before council in September with the third part of an administrative review. It's looking at outside boards and agencies. I believe there's an opportunity, Madam Clerk, to be able to look at the minutes that come to council, that is the record of each one of those committees, not the actual reports, but the minutes, and also look at should there be a desire on behalf of council to decrease the number of reports, minutes, and cycles that happen. I realize that's upside down from what Councillor Bell is suggesting, to have everything come to council. Certainly we'll be back before council, Mr. Chairman, in September regarding that third cycle of a look at administrative cycles, outside boards and agencies, and those important partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bell.
There was sort of a part two, and this is going to come up later in the agenda. I know there's there's an appointment of boards and committees later on today, but it's also sparked this piece of the conversation, which is I think that in 25, and maybe this will come up again at budget, but at the moment it's just a comment and potentially a staff report. But I think that we need to relook at not just the reports of the boards and committees, but the boards and committees themselves. So the entire policy around volunteerism and how we treat volunteers, and typically when you're working with volunteers, the idea is that the person who's doing the volunteering is doing it to give back to their community, and they want to be an essential part of that. And oftentimes I'm finding in boards and committees, the members they're not walking away with the satisfaction of being able to have contributed to something. So I think just a second look at how we are structuring our boards and committees so that we can attract the talent that we have in Ramara Township, which is incredibly broad. And just because of our demographic, we know that we have a lot of retirees who have come from, different varied backgrounds and probably have quite a lot to offer to our boards and committees. And the approach that the boards and committees are, when somebody does a good job, it doesn't take away from somebody else's good job, as I guess what I'm saying. So we should be valuing our community members who want to participate, and we shouldn't see their desire to, create a poster or write some content or deliver, say they have a CAD background and they can do design for us. I don't know why we would ever say no to that. And in my experience over the last couple of years, I've found that it's always sort of, no, we don't have a method or a methodology, and that's just procedural. But we don't have a methodology for allowing collaboration between township staff and our board and committee members, other than when we sit in a meeting and someone says, I did this, and the other person says, great, that's conversation, but it's not a mechanism. So, there's lots of ways that you can document share through Google Docs, for example. There's lots of Canva is a great method for poster sharing. You can invite anybody to it. So I think in general, I would like to motion that we have a staff report that talks about how can we improve our volunteerism and the structure of our boards and committees.
CAO, Mr. Dunn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I realize the councillor is looking for a seconder for her resolution at this time. Councillor, I would respectfully suggest perhaps it's premature. Wait until the third update comes to council. Perhaps then it may be opportunistic to look at how you would deal with this collectively, Mr. Chairman, moving forward in 2025. That's not going to happen in 2024. Just a response, trying to provide some clarity with an opportunity to perhaps have a more informed discussion when we're together dealing with the matter in September.
So there is a motion on the floor.
Well, I didn't actually make the motion yet. It was just, that's what I was trying to actually learn from the CAO is where are we going so that we can know, do we need a staff report? And if we do, when's the appropriate time to bring it? So I think that was answered, and I appreciate that.
Okay. Is there any unfinished or new business? Any other? I actually have one myself. I noticed with the Committee of Adjustment that I'm not getting regular updates, that I have to go searching. Have we changed our system at all? Because I used to get them, and now I've noticed that I have to go look for it. It doesn't come to my email box. Is anybody else getting them? Let me ask.
I'm getting.
You get the Committee of Adjustment?
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll go in and check my white list or black list thing.
My understanding from the bylaw for Committee of Adjustment is it's mayor, deputy mayor, and whatever councillor that the application is in that ward receives it. So you get what would happen in your ward, but not necessarily in 2, 3, 4, or 5.
Okay, so maybe there hasn't been any up there. I would like to get notified on all of them in the township. Does anybody?
I concur. So I'll put that motion on the floor since you're chairing.
All in favor? Passed. Okay, have no more unfinished or new business, so I'll send it back to Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Oh,
Sorry, I did have one more, actually.
Sorry. We're back to Councillor Bell.
Sorry, I hadn't been finished. I'm sorry. I do just have one more, and it has to do with video, which and we have talked about this at different points over the past year or so. But when we record the videos, we sometimes have meetings that are 2, 3, and I think last year's budget was 6 hours in some. And the recordings don't always have a time stamp on them that compares to when that matter was addressed by agenda item. So for residents who are trying to go and watch back, it's difficult for them to sit through 6 hours and 20 minutes worth of video when they're just looking for one portion of the agenda, for example. So we did talk about this once briefly, like I said, a year ago. So
I'm just going to cut you off a little bit, but mine does. So I don't know why yours doesn't. So when I look at the video agenda, it shows me every item and what time it is, and I can click that directly. We started that about 2 years ago.
some do, some don't. And definitely the 6 hour sum budget did not, unless somebody's added it in the last few months, because I've gone back to it more than once and it's not. So I guess I'm just mentioning this again, and I have heard what CAO Dunn has said, and this administrative review is coming back. So I can hold it off till then, but I wanted to mention it today because it's worth mentioning that there should be a method for people to go in and access the agenda and watch the portions of the
So let me
videos.
interrupt you here for a second. Ashley, can you please explain what we're doing as far as policy?
This is actually with the clerk's department.
Okay,
Through your chair, we are working on adding timestamps to the missing minutes and agendas. But due to staff restraints, we've been missing a few of them. So we are going back and working on that.
okay. Because I think that we brought that up a long time ago, that it should be on everyone, so you can go. I know it's a problem with me trying to find the information, but those key indexes get you right to it. So do you need anything else, Mr. Dunn, from us?
Mr. Chairman, you're passing it to the mayor, not before you move to item 5, but perhaps, Mr. Mayor, this might be an opportune time to take a bio break.
Okay. All right. So we will break and come back. How about we come back at 11 o'clock?
are we, Councillor Bell?
Well, just to finish that, I know that CAO Dunn said you're bringing back the administrative review. That's great. But I just wonder too, so just probably be a budget discussion, but I just want to say while we're on this topic that there is software out there, so we could automate that process of stamping videos, right? It doesn't have to be a manual process. So I don't know how much we value it, but I know residents do. They like to be able to go to the agendas. So just as we're talking about that, I just throw it out there to keep it in mind that there are ways that we can automate that, and so that staff isn't sitting and spending hours and hours of their time, which to me doesn't seem like a good use of time when there's a tool out there to do
Okay, so I'll ask one more question to staff. Do we have this process automated, or is it all done manually?
Through your chair, it is done manually.
Thank you. All right, so we will break until 11 o'clock. Thank you.
Okay, I see everybody coming back, so I'll call the meeting back to order. I'll look for my clerk to make sure I have a quorum.
Thank you, your worship. I can confirm you have quorum.
Okay, thank you. Just maybe a heads up to council first. Thank you for pulling the item at committee of the whole, because I stressed that at our last training session that we need to make sure we pull items that we want separate votes at committee of the whole or prior to the agenda being posted. Because as I said, I'm going to be very reluctant now when agendas are posted that we start changing it. The public expect us to deal with the items the way they're presented. And it's not very open and transparent when we change a meeting midway through. So if we go to change our agenda, then I'm going to want a 2/3 majority is how I read it now. And please respect the chair when the chair is speaking. It's different when I'm mayor. We are one of the few municipalities that actually let each councillor take a turn chairing. The chair controls the meeting. The chair is not interrupting people. When the chair puts their hand up or asks for quiet clarification, that is their job as chair. So please respect the chairs when they're chairing. If a councillor does not agree with the ruling of a chair, the councillor does have the right to challenge a ruling and put it to a vote of council. But it's the chair that rules the meeting. It's the chair that runs the meeting. So with that, I will turn the chair over to the deputy mayor.
Perfect. There is nothing on the agenda this week. Any unfinished or new business? Counselor to you.
Thank you. Through the chair to Josh, our residents are getting very excited to access our new sports court at the Atherley Community Park. And you can imagine that it's frustrating for them that it is locked until the new sign explaining the guidelines is installed. I know we have our grand opening this Friday on the 30th, but it would be so nice if residents had a chance to use it before heading back to work and school. Is there any way that we can speed up the timeline on the sign?
The physical sign, we cannot speed the process up. It's a custom made sign from our supplier. What I am going to be doing, I was going to try to run with the printer to see how it turned out. But we're printing out a copy of what the sign will be posted. We'll laminate it. And hopefully I can get it laminated tonight, and I'll get the sign up tomorrow and have it opened hopefully tomorrow. So,
Great.
That's great news. Thank you.
That's all. Anything else? All right. Any items to be pulled for council? No. I'll pass it back to you then.
Thank you. And I will go to Councillor to you for environmental services.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There is one item on the agenda today, 6.1, expansion of the mosquito larviciding program, ID 4824. Recommendation that council receives report ID 4824 regarding the possible expansion of the mosquito larviciding program as information. Can somebody please put this on the floor? Councillor Fisher, seconded by Councillor Goff. Before opening it up for questions and discussion, Josh, did you want to speak to the report?
I believe the report's pretty self-explanatory. If there is any questions, I can answer them now.
Okay, I have some questions actually. And again, I know that we've emailed about this, but again, this is sort of based on, for the public so that they can better understand. So this section of the report states that based on the 2024 pricing, the current program has an expense of $42.68 per hectare. And the anticipated cost for the expansion of the program in 2025 would be $625,000, which includes the 42.28 or 68 per hectare, plus an additional 35% for administrative hours, additional equipment, additional flying time, and storage of the bulk granular larvicide. So this pricing would work out to approximately $81.38 per property in the township, based on the number of properties we have, 7,680. The current price that is built out to the benefiting users is $17 per property. So my question is, would it not stand to reason that the price per property would go down if more users were brought onto the system, much like water and wastewater, i.e. the contractor is already up there in a plane and he's already purchasing and storing the larvicide. So why would the cost jump from $17 per property to suddenly $81.38 per property?
So to answer your question, the price would not go down because where we're currently spraying on that 1,200 hectares is a highly dense area where there is a lot of homes. Where we're planning the expansion to, you're moving out to agricultural properties, recreational properties where there's a lot more area, but a lot less homes. The amount of time right now we get about the entire, or not the entire, sorry, we get the 1,200 hectares sprayed in about 2 days. This program, if we were to go township wide, we're probably going to be looking with the same equipment anyways, you'd be looking at a 2-week application period. We're looking to bring in possibly up to 6 helicopters if we do it, to bring it back down to that 2 days. But we also need to look at alternate airfields. That way we're not flying the helicopter all from one point. We're kind of trying to maximize our areas with that machine. But yeah, to answer the question, it theoretically it should go down because you're expanding it out, but because of the additional equipment, the additional herbicides, and then just the sheer area of it, it doesn't lower the price, it actually increases it.
Okay, that's interesting. The other question I have for clarification regarding the tax rate is, so the report again states that the application of the larvicide, if expanded township-wide, would become part of the taxation requirement, meaning that it wouldn't be an area charge as it is right now. Area charges, as you said, are only used for a specific part of the township, benefits that benefit from the additional service. For the project valued at $625,000, the approximate municipal tax rate increase of 4.3% would be required. So what I don't understand about that is that, so there's $81.38 per property, I guess, is that equal to a 4.3% tax increase? And would that be in addition to the tax rate increase we had already decided in the 2024 budget? And I guess where I'm confused is that not all properties are valued the same. So I'm not sure if adding the 4.3% tax increase to make the mosquito larvicide program cost per property fair. So for example, there's people who pay about $2,000 a year in property taxes, and there are some people who pay $18,000 per year. So would that then mean that the people paying $2,000 a year, would they have a mosquito larvicide cost of $86 per year? But the people whose property tax is $18,000 per year, they would be paying 4.3% of that, which would be $774 per year for the mosquito larvicide. Thank you so much, Manon, for writing me back on this, but I think the residents would be concerned if those properties assessed at a higher value would end up paying more for the larviciding program than someone with a property assessed at a lower value.
Okay, so there's a lot of information in there.
Sorry.
So the $80 that was calculated, this is just to show the new service, how much it would cost. This is not going to be put on a tax bill. The only time we put an area charge is for when we have a service for a specific area. Now, if we're talking to expand it township-wide, then it becomes a municipal service such as road maintenance, libraries, all of that. So it's part of our budget as a whole. And that's why it's now part of the tax rate. The reason I went in and put the 3.5% tax rate increase is just to illustrate how much it could mean. It doesn't mean we'll have to do that. It depends how much money we need in 1 year when we do the budget. But 1% tax increase is equal to 145 and 145,800. So if we take this 625 and divide it by the 145, it comes up to 4.3 rate increase.
Okay.
So it's not the $80 and the tax rate increase. The $80 was only to show that expanding the program is actually costing more than what it was. Now, if we were to do it as a township, then it wouldn't be a specific area charge. It would just fall like all the other projects that we're doing.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. I guess, again, I was just confused about the residents before they can get excited about something like the mosquito larvicide program, which, believe me, many of them are excited about, without knowing what the actual cost is per household. I think it's hard for people to know whether they're in support of that or not. Does anybody have any questions on this? Go ahead, Councillor Bell.
Thank you. I guess actually first it's a procedure question. I prefer not to interrupt people or use points of order because I don't think it's I don't think it's respectful. But as a matter of procedure, my understanding of the role of a chair is not to enter into discussion primarily, but rather to facilitate. Because do you want me to use it as a point of order, Dave? I'm trying to be respectful of my colleagues. And so I don't interrupt people, and you just interrupted me again. So my question is for the clerk or the CAO. My understanding is the chair's role is not to put the matter on the floor and then enter into discussion. Rather, the chair's role is to facilitate the discussion so that the rest of the members have the opportunity to speak to a matter. So moving forward, I would just like clarification on what the role of a chair is. And that can be answered now or later, whatever. I don't want to call a point of order because I don't think that that's a polite way for us to deal with each other. With regard to my question, it is, I know, for example, Mayor Clark had noted how great it would be if he could have that mosquito larviciding in his part of the township. So I guess what I'm wondering is, can we phase this in? Right here, we're just receiving the report and we're not making a recommendation. So I'm just wondering, Josh, if you can speak to that. Is there a way? And I realize this is a huge expense. So could it be phased in little by little over the next few years?
In talking with the contractor, they prefer to be all in one shot. The only reasoning for that is because they have to get some equipment that's required for the contract. They have some, but they need a little bit more to be able to facilitate everything. It could be done for sure. That's what I was originally looking at, to try to phase it in over 2 or 3 years. But even when you're phasing it in, how do you determine what area goes first? It could be a staff recommendation of what area takes precedence over another. But even with that, there'll be pushback. Well, why this one and not that one? It could be done. There'd be some working and tender contract requirements within it. Because you wouldn't want one contractor to start it and another one to kind of take over, just because they're putting all that investment into the equipment. My preference, if we were to move forward, would be to do it all in one go. But to go all in one go, essentially for next year, we need to start now, because we got to get notifications out to all the residents for people to be able to opt out. Even if somebody does opt out, they're still financially responsible for the program. It's just not sprayed over their property. We could. It's just try to figure out the logistics of it. So.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Snutch.
Have we ever reached out to the public to see if they're interested in this program?
No, we haven't. It was the directive of council to.
Because I'm dead against us doing this. I'm much in favor of small government rather than big government. What are we going to do if people have too many spiders or frogs? This is, I think, 625,000 is a ridiculous amount of money with everything else that we've got going on. I certainly have not had one person come up to me other than Councillor Tuyu and say that she would be in favor. Nobody wants it in our ward, so I'd appreciate it if people would leave us out of this if you guys decide to go ahead. That's all I have to say.
Are there any other questions? Go ahead, Mayor Clark.
I did see Minot put her hand up. I didn't know she had
Oh, I thought you
a
were-
accounting question before I go ahead.
I just want to mention that if we were going to phase in, that will require a lot of resources on our side, because we need a mapping and then we need to bill each property. Because if we're phasing it in, I don't think it could be part of the tax rate, because not everybody would benefit from it. It would require a lot of staff time to get there for just a short period of time, and then increase it and then move away from it and it become like a township program.
So Mike, if I may now,
course.
yeah, my comments again. Years ago, I was a Ward 3 councillor. We actually looked into this program. Oh boy, Duffy was mayor at the time. It was $1 million to do the township at that time. Now that company was guaranteeing they'd even get out with backpacks and do every little pond. At that time, yeah, there was an overwhelming support. However, the province of Ontario would not allow the expansion of the program. So we were able to keep our existing program because it was grandfathered in. So now my concern would be if we do the new program and policies change, would it be considered, it's a nuisance mosquito. That's what our program is. As long as we label this the same way, that we don't ever want to lose the area we're doing now. Because rules and regulations change all the time. And trust me, you wouldn't live in parts of this township if this program didn't take place. I remember John O'Donnell saying that about Lagoon City. You wouldn't live there if there wasn't a mosquito program, and many parts of Ward 3 where the program exists. And that's where Dave, get the people wanting it, because when you're Ward 3 counselor and part of your ward is covered and part of it isn't, and anybody that owns property in both can clearly tell the difference when you're within an area where the mosquitoes are done or when you're within an area it's not done. So I'm supportive of it. I just want to be mindful that there's no risk of us losing the existing one. So I don't know if you can help me out on that, Chuck.
No, so there's no risk. If we continue status quo, there's no risk of losing our current spray areas. And meeting with the ministry and talking with the ministry, an expansion to the program, they didn't have any concerns with, as long as we're doing the pre and post dips to ensure that there's larva there that needs to be controlled. So the big push is to say it's nuisance mosquitoes. We are controlling. There is a lot of support for it, especially with West Nile and everything, because it does help in a way to mitigate some of the West Nile. It doesn't control West Nile, but it mitigates it. So there is no concerns from the ministry side from everything that we've got for expansion, and there's no concerns that we're going to lose the areas that we currently have.
Perfect. Thank you, because that was my concern.
Go ahead, Councillor Goff.
Ashley, I've heard lots of people, even in your ward, David, that once they're aware of this program, that want this program for the whole municipality. And I was kind of impressed when I actually read this, and it actually said it helped with black flies. I think that's another great reason to have this. You mentioned with the mosquitoes and West Nile, and now there's another Zika virus that could be affecting people. I think it's something that as a municipality, we should maybe give you the reins to actually move this forward, and we'll find the money somewhere.
Go ahead, Councillor Bell.
Sorry, I think Josh was going to say something first and then because it might.
Yeah, sorry. The only comment I have with black flies, the larva period for control is different from that of mosquitoes. So to be able to, this product would control black flies, but it's got to be done at that certain period of time when it's required. So this will not eradicate black flies. This will only be for mosquitoes. I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Thank you. I guess my question too was, at one point when you and I had been speaking, there was potential for maybe some provincial grants regarding that it could impact on West Nile and those sorts of things. And I'm wondering, are there grants? Do we know? Or if we don't feel, if we're going to move this to budget discussions and then somehow we don't feel that we could implement it next year, I guess two things, maybe we could look for more funding or types of funding next year. But the other thing is, if there's concern about whether the communities all want the program, maybe in 25, a good move would be to do that community engagement widespread across the township and find out what the numbers really are. So that we know if we really just want to stick it as a, area charge for those that want it versus township wide. So I just wonder if we should send it to budget discussions and then figure out then what we think is the best move for 25.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Three things in reverse chronology. I would ask the council not punt this to budget. I would ask that the resolution that has been drafted, or the recommendation that has been drafted that forms the resolution, is that council receive this report today. However, staff need to clearly understand that council has an appetite to move this along. Funding it is a separate matter. A desire by council to move this along, and an opportunity for Mr. Kavanaugh to come back with a report that would clearly identify not only the overall cost. Ms. Higgins has been very clear regarding the challenge of a staged approach that would not allow support across the entire municipality from a funding perspective, i.e. area charges, which I think would be challenging. The mosquitoes don't care about which area they live. That was a humor, Madam Chair. So direction from council with respect to receiving and shall we proceed in doing more analysis? Whether at that time, when it's back before you, Mr. Kavanaugh, and there's not an appetite to be able to fund that, you still need to be able to have more detailed information to council, for council, to make an informed decision at that time. So, Madam Chair, that was 1 and 2. Earlier on, through you, Madam Chair, the councillor posed a process question regarding the role of the chair. Certainly in my short career, I have seen multiple ways on how to manage a meeting by the chair, by the mayor. Certainly, I have frequently seen the chair set the table for discussion. And the facilitation role of the chair is critically important. But I have seen on many occasions the chair set the table with respect to the deliberations or the decisions that would take place at the committee. So, Madam Chair, respectfully, the report that is before committee is for information. I would hope that there would be clear direction from council regarding the next steps for Mr. Kavanaugh and Josh. At the end of the day, it will require perhaps a decision for funding by council or not in 25 or in the future.
Thank you. I think just based on all the questions here that there clearly is a need to look into this further, and that won't, necessarily force us into going with this or not. Because I had thought that one of the side benefits of using this mosquito larvicide program was to eliminate the need for residents to hire contractors that have been known to use harmful chemicals. So if we're going to make the program cost prohibitive, then council will likely not support this for the residents, which means that those who have been hiring the contractors with the harmful chemicals will likely still continue to do that. So I think in that sense, the point that Councillor Bell made was a good one about requesting if there's any funding or grant program available, especially in a situation where we want to do the responsible thing environmentally. And I think also by the residents, if we were to set up some kind of survey where people could, absolutely indicate how they feel about it once they know all of the information and costs. So I think it's, I think we absolutely need to have Josh go ahead and look into it further. Go ahead, Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair, to you. I was actually just going to pretty much say exactly what you just said. As somebody who suffers from a vector-borne disease and illness that will cause me great disadvantage for the rest of my life, I do hire out contractors to come and spray the property, and it costs a lot more than what is being proposed here, personally. But even aside from that, as you said, there's been contractors that I've turned away just because they haven't been able to give me the information of the insecticides that they're using. And by using an insecticide, therefore, it then affects other wildlife on my property as well. I certainly would never, ever wish on anybody in my entire life that I've known, past or present, or most likely future, to what I have to suffer from getting an illness from being bit by a bug. It's been life-changing, and I 100% am in support of this program. And I have not had any residents that I've come in contact with discussions in this feel any other way than absolutely, even if it's just for, them being pesky and buzzing in your ear. So I fully support moving forward with this project.
Great. Go ahead, Mayor Clark.
So the motion says to receive, and just clarifying with the CEO, we want to make sure it moves forward. So do you need a vote to say that and that we proceed and Josh proceed gathering information? Do we tag that to this motion? I'm kind of looking for direction from staff here.
My only concern is if we move it to budget, it's gonna be too late for me to get it in place for 2025.
Right. So you want to proceed and we proceed then. So we would receive the report and proceed. Is that what you're looking for today? You
Well,
need,
we'd almost need to do a pre-budget approval for next year and then we funding it.
Pardon me. Sure.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you. That's exactly why I was asking because the motion is just to receive, so that's not going to move us forward. So that's why I was asking, are we trying to defer it or are we trying to do community? Like, what are we trying to do? That's exactly what I was asking.
and if I may, on the procedure, actually, I got the same concern that you brought up, Councillor Bell, when I used to chair performance management at county, sharing my opinion too much. And what the warden told me at that time is open it up to the floor first and let the floor have their discussion and then put your concerns at the end, because there's a good chance somebody else will have the same point. And then as you as chair don't have to. So that's my advice to councillors, always go to the floor first and then do your wrap up at the end, but it can be done either way.
Thank you. That was why I was asking that question as well, because when I've done training with Robert's rules, the chair is not, it's not advisable for the chair to speak. It's advisable for the chair to put the matter on the floor for the members to speak to. And it doesn't matter to me either way, frankly, but I think that since we're doing procedure bylaw updates, that we should clarify what the role of chair is so that we all treat it the same way.
Apologize.
Oh. That's okay. I wasn't sure if we're officially waiting or if we should continue discussion while they're discussing it. But does anybody have any other comments while we're waiting for our staff to discuss how we're moving forward with this rather than just receiving, but to try to sort of get the pieces in place before our next budget discussions? Go ahead, Councillor.
Just one thing I wonder is, we can start with, I guess, maybe, I don't know, does everybody think we need to do community engagement, or do we collectively think that we know that the program, I mean, anecdotally, I say the program's wanted based on what people tell me, but then I'm hearing Councillor Snatch say that's not the case. So I think that's part of it. Like, do we think we need to do that, or do we think we can skip that stage?
I mean, for me, it's sort of tied in with the price, right? Like sometimes it's like, yeah, I love that jacket, but I'd like to know how much it is first before I commit to loving that jacket. Do you know what I mean? But if we could get that number first. Go ahead, Councillor Fisher.
My concern with doing community engagement is putting things away too far into the future to get a response. And historically, I'm not sure how much community engagement we actually receive. And as you said, anecdotally, we are aware that there is an appetite. And we did hear Josh say that if we move forward with this program, the residents can choose to opt out of the program. It just doesn't negate them from their financial responsibility. So if council's having an appetite to move this forward, is the response from community engagement going to change minds of members of council?
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
I'd have to agree with Councillor Snatch on this one. I mean, if we allowed, when we came to the parking bylaws and all the different bylaws that we initiated in Ward 4 and 5, it was clear it wasn't desired in Ward 1, and he is the representative for Ward 1. I don't see the point in pushing it in that ward if he hasn't seen that increased, request for that area. And leave it as an option, but I just don't see that. I mean, personally, I'm in Ward 1 and I love it, but it's not going to be a game changer.
Go ahead, Councillor Bell.
Thank you. Because I think it's also worth mentioning what you raised, Councillor, to you as well. We do actually have the environmental responsibility, and I would concur with you that there are a number of people using different products. And, again, it's anecdotal, but if you watch social media platforms, what you see on a very regular basis is a call out for, does anybody know what company does X? And so I do think that there are people who are using different kinds of products, and particularly close to the water, not a good idea. not a good idea at all, but definitely when it goes straight into Lake Simcoe, we don't want that either. So I think that has to be part of the conversation. Sometimes governance just means making decisions. And so that's why I was asking, what do we think about community engagement? Because it just might be, this is a program that's good for people's health and good for the environment. So it's something that we just want to move forward with.
Yeah, I think it's worth investigating. Oh, is staff ready? Okay.
I apologize, Madam Chair, members of council. The recommendation on the staff report was to receive for information. I can't recall, Madam Chair, who moved and seconded that resolution. However, in discussion with Mr. Kavanaugh, there's an opportunity, a very short window, an opportunity to be able to provide further update on the 11th of September. And I believe that will be a drop dead date as well. So at that time, the updated staff report would indicate whether this was going forward with a budget allocation committed for 2025, or whether there's other steps that need to be taken. And certainly we've heard clearly that some members of council wish to have some additional steps taken. So, Madam Chair, if the resolution that's on the floor to receive the report could be amended to and that staff report back, it will be a committee of the whole, Madam Clerk, on the 11th. However, at that time, we would be in the short updated report, identify some of the threads of discussion today, and a request, if it does go forward, there would be a commitment that would be incorporated into the 25 budget. And I realize there's a number of things that were discussed in conversation this morning. If that could be amended, Madam Chair, that would be helpful from a staff perspective.
Yes, that's what I was hoping to do. So would the new motion be, instead of receiving as information, but to also figure out the cost per household by September 11th? Is that what we were?
Madam Chair, there would be multiple components. I wouldn't suggest that that be the revision to the resolution. I would respectfully suggest receive and report back based on all the conversations that have taken place with council this morning.
That's perfect, rather than me trying to figure out how to articulate everything we just discussed. So, okay, so let's take a vote on that. All in favor?
I think you just need clarity. I think you need the approval of the first and second or of the amendment.
Oh, I thought we did that before. Right, so can I get a first and second on this new motion, please?
We already have one. We have Councillor Fisher and Councillor Goff.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you. Oh, so I have to do a whole new one on the amendment.
No, they just need to approve the amendment, a friendly,
Are
and they
the
both
first and
do. So
second
we,
is okay with the amendment? Okay, great. Can we all in favor? Super. Is there any unfinished or new business? Go ahead, Councillor Goff. Oh, you're opposed. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This happens to be with regarding to the boil water advisory that came out for Bayshore Village a couple weeks ago. It came to my knowledge that there might be an issue with actually how we get the word out to everybody. A lot of people aren't signed up for the alertables. I don't know if there's a system in place where we can maybe email. We know who the users are, because a lot of them could be just up on weekends, and to send out a motion or notice, snail mail, they're not going to get it. They might come up through the week and it's not reaching them. So I don't know if there's a system, or we need to develop a system that makes sure that everybody that's affected by a boil water alert has the knowledge that that's what's happening.
So typically when we do issue a boil water advisory, it's initiated by the ministry, and they typically depict how that notice goes out. So depending on the severity of it, we always push it out on our social medias. Depending on the severity, they could order us to hand deliver notices to every resident that's on there. With the instance that we had, there was a chance of contamination, but that chance was very minuscule. So it was directed to us that we can just do it on our social media platforms. If we were to go email, it might be hard to manage. Just how do you keep that email up to date? And how do you, if it's an area specific boil advisory or any advisory, you'd have to have those all set up within that email system. The easiest way is our social media platforms. Alertable puts it out. It sets it up, that area specific notification with Alertable. I know we've been pushing out Alertable to all residents to try to get to sign up for it. It deals with everything within the township, anything boil water, road, anything like that. So typically, if it's really severe, we do hand notices. We come in, we'll print them out, and we'll deliver door to door. So
I'll follow this.
Of course.
I understand that's what we're doing now. But we have a lot of residents that have properties that aren't up here all the time, aren't signed up for the alertables, aren't monitoring our social media pages. I just think there's got to be a way that we can maybe, I know emails, it's going to be a keeping record of that. Maybe there's something that we have to push out every time we send out a water bill. Make sure you sign up for the alertables.
that's already on the mail out, the alert.
Okay, so, but if people aren't signing up, I think it's a health concern and a safety risk if two people don't get that and end up drinking the water. I know it was a minor case in Bayshore, but if two people drink the water and ended up getting sick, we're become liable. So I think we have to make every effort to make sure that the word gets out there to people.
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
I'm just wondering if there's a sign we can temporarily put at the entranceway of Bayshore that we can, not temporary, but a permanent one that allows us to put a notification up, because it does happen a few times a year. Just post that sign, people coming in and out can see it every time.
But it's not always Bayshore, right? It could be Davy Drive, it could be Lagoon City. Right?
Okay.
So I think it's got to be.
I don't know how else should.
Yeah, the only fear with signage, like I've always kind of looked at the variable message signboards that are mobile. They're on a trailer. You can set them up where you need to. It's the cost of them. I know we rented it when we did some work in Lagoon City last year. I think they were $3,000 a month to rent. They are available for rental, but if we had one and we had it posted at one entrance, it now has to be at all 7 water systems. If it's a trailer, it will work as long as we don't have 2 boil waters at the same weekend type thing. It could be as simple, I don't know, spitball, maybe I shouldn't, but just have signs we push into the entrance to the areas, little sandwich boards or something like that. But even with that, there's no guarantee people drive by and see it or read it, so.
Thanks. Go ahead, Councillor Bell.
Thanks. As far as that is exactly what I was going to say, Josh, because we do use them for the herbicide. So they may not have a day or a date on them, but just the same idea where you could just have the stick on portion of it that says, and then if you had whatever number is reasonable to put in a neighborhood or multiple neighborhoods. So that was my first suggestion. And then my second suggestion would be to work through the community centers as well. So I know oftentimes Ashley's been able to in Lagoon City at least go to LCCA and ask if they could update their sign. And so I wonder if something like that could have happened at Bayshore where it goes through the community center. So just a communications piece. And then my third suggestion, just across the board on this, as well as with Alertable, I push it out all the time too. And I always hope that there's some measure of success. But I wonder if there would be some value to having a sign up for alertable day where people could come in, whether it's at the office or whether it's within each community at the community center and, you know, physically have a staff member there that shows them how to sign up. Because even people that aren't necessarily huge adopters of technology typically today have a phone. So that might be one way of making it more user friendly because I think alertable is amazing. And the fact that you can go area specific, it's the best way to reach people and quickly. So I think that might be a good idea.
Go ahead, Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. When that Boyle advisory came out, I actually thought, too bad we don't have a sign on a trailer. And I understand renting one for $3,000 a month is expensive. But I'm wondering if maybe we should look at budget time purchasing one that can be movable. And worst case scenario, if we do have two areas that need to have signs, we're only renting one and just have it. My concern with having a permanent sign is people go sign blind and then they don't see what's actually written on it. They're not paying attention if there are changes. So, you know, if you have one at the entrance of, that would affect that area. And then we might be looking at renting less and then we own a sign. So we can use it for when we come back and have our Canada Day celebrations, we can send them, say, hey, come over this way. You got to park over there so you can go watch the drone show fireworks, right? Then we'll actually own a sign. I understand that we don't have a lot of money. We just heard we don't have a lot of money, but we also have to really be cognizant about just scraping by. And I'm wondering if having a sign might actually be a benefit. I can't imagine a sign in a trailer with some marquee letters. Doesn't have to be all fancy lights plug in.
Go ahead, Mayor Clark.
Okay, I guess what we're looking for is a report because we spent a lot of time on this and we still got a heavy agenda. So if maybe we get a report, mindful of what you're saying, but again, Bracken Lagoon City, where would you put the sign? Because it's not just Lagoon City. It's not just, you got two highways, you got Canal Road, you've got the 5th Side Road, you've got 47, like there's many, many entrances to that area. So I think as long as we're following the provincially mandated, then we're safe. You know, we've done everything we can under the law. When you start going beyond and you do it for one area and not another, we can get in a bit of trouble. So I'd certainly support if we wanted to just send a quick report on suggestions the staff could come up with that could get the word out better. So I would second that if you're moving it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like, as you brought up, Councillor Goff, not everybody here is a full-time resident. Maybe some cottagers might decide, oh, I'm not going to come up this weekend if there's a boil water advisory. So in that instance, a sign is maybe not effective. So I'd like to urge everybody, if they haven't given their email to the township yet, I mean, you know, we're only as good as our database for getting in touch with people. So, yeah, so did we have a first and second for that motion? All in favor? Yes, that's passed. Is there any other unfinished or new business? Seeing none, back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And now I will go on to Protective Services, Councillor Bell. Sorry, I missed planning. I apologize. I got planning, Councillor Fisher. We got some roosters to talk about.
We have some roosters to talk about. Thank you, Mayor. We just don't want to talk about roosters. I don't know. There's one item on the agenda and it is item 7.1, roosters and agricultural uses in the township. The recommendation is that council receive report BP 3324 regarding agricultural uses in the township as information. Can I please have somebody put that on the floor? Thank you, Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Bell. This report was presented by Ms. Stong, our planner, and I don't know if she wants to speak on it a little bit before we get into discussion.
Good morning, everyone. This report was requested by Councillor Snutch to provide information on where roosters are permitted in the municipality. So we went through the zoning bylaw and identified the areas where the agricultural uses are provided. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Super. All right, Mayor.
Just on that, because I know the concern and they are noisy and they are a pain, is where you've got residential on one side, roosters aren't allowed, but the other side of the road might be rural. So if it's a severed lot in a rural zoning, that's still considered a residential lot, is it not?
According to the zoning bylaw, it's still listed as a rural lot. So it would depend on how the lot was first created, but without the lot being zoned something else, it would still be considered a rural lot and the rural uses would be permitted.
Okay.
Councillor, do you? Sure.
Can I have a follow-up on that? So again, in the case of my neighbors, I severed a lot off my farm years ago. It's not considered an ag lot. Even though it's severed off prime agriculture, it's not an ag lot, it's a residential lot. They can't have unlimited trailers, they can't, it's a residential lot. So why would the rule be any different when it's severed off? Why is it not a residential lot?
So when it comes to trailers, I'd have to review the section of the zoning bylaw regarding trailers. But when you go for permitted uses, it's an agricultural lot. So agricultural uses would still be permitted on the lot the way the bylaw is written. Now, you'd have to do MDS and things like that, right? But
Can't have thousand picture, yeah.
yeah, but unless the lot is zoned something different, it doesn't strictly prohibit rural uses on rural lots.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Councilor, to you. Councilor, can you turn off your mic so Dana can go on?
I guess my question is rural does not necessarily mean a giant piece of property well away from other neighbors. Sometimes these lots are actually quite small. And as the mayor had suggested, sometimes across the road from you know, a zoning that is not complementary to that. And I'm just wondering if there could be something like minimum lot size or maximum lot size, I guess, for having these backyard chickens. So say, for example, I don't know, there's some rural zoned properties in an area that we had discussed previously, and most of them are taken up by wetland rather than actual land. And I'm just wondering, are those properties then judged on the whole size or on the usable part? And could that be made a limitation?
So it would depend on the zoning of the property. Because in the natural area protection designation, you are allowed to continue existing agricultural uses. The backyard chicken bylaw does not discuss rural or agricultural lots. It was really written to do sort of a trial basis to have backyard chickens in residential areas like your Washagos and Atherley, Updergrove, Brecken, Lagoon City, that kind of thing. There are minimum lot sizes for those. They also can't be on water if it's in the village residential. There's a variety of provisions in the temporary backyard chicken, but the backyard chicken temporary doesn't apply to the rural and agricultural parcels because the agricultural, it's an agricultural area. So if council wanted, we could sort of look into ways of restricting that without restricting people's ability to use their rural and agricultural land. Like for example, and it hasn't been adopted yet by any means, but in our official plan, our draft official plan, there's language in there about zoning these properties that are created as rural residential, actually zoning them rural residential instead of maintaining that same zoning. Because the way that the bylaw is written, and I'm just pulling it up, but in rural, like it's a rural parcel, not accessory to an agricultural use. So if you have an agricultural use on a property, the way the letter of the law is written is that house is accessory to the agricultural use. But then you could, in the rural designation or rural zoning, you could have a rural lot with the house on it that has an accessory sort of small scale agricultural use. You have to follow MDS. So you're not going to put up a barn and have a bunch of cows or anything like that. But it is sort of, that's kind of where the chickens can fall into because they don't trigger that MDS for a handful. So in terms of the roosters and the lot size and the backyard chicken, it doesn't apply to these properties. And then any changes made to the bylaw, those properties would then have kind of a legal non-conforming use if they existed prior to the change of the zoning.
Oh,
Sorry, I just, nobody knows what MDS is. Listeners,
I'm
they won't
sorry.
know. That's
I'm
all.
sorry.
Thank you.
I'm very bad for that. Plannerism. It's minimum distance separation. So if you wanted to establish a barn or something, you'd have to do minimum distance separation based on the number of animals, the type of animals, and the type of manure storage. And then it makes sure that those barns are away from houses. Sorry.
Okay, Councillor Goff. Oh, Councillor Snatch.
No, I was just going to say that it's, we have to fix it because most of these, or the three that I'm referring to, are 30-foot wide lots, maybe 100, and it's very heavily dense. And when we came up with this, we were thinking that these roosters would not go in areas that they would disturb their neighbors. And some of these roosters are very aggravating, and it really drives a lot of people nuts. So I guess what I'd be asking for is just, we don't, for staff to try to figure out how to solve it. Either that or eliminate the temporary bylaw that we put in place when the time limit's up. But you're saying that wouldn't help anyways, because but maybe we need another definition, because you can't have roosters in a subdivision.
Councillor Goff?
Yeah, my question was, I don't know why we're talking about roosters. Obviously, this was before I came to council, and obviously Councillor Snutch has an issue with some roosters that are quite frustrating and disturbing him.
Not me.
No? Okay. But I thought when we passed the backyard chicken bylaw that they couldn't have roosters. But this is properties that aren't considered in the backyard chicken zone. These are rural properties across the road from residential areas that are considered rural and have roosters.
So through the chair to Councillor Goff, I believe that's like in this instance, if there was a hypothetical rooster on a rural parcel that was hypothetically across from a residential area, if the zoning of that lot permits the rooster, because it's rural, even changing their zoning or changing their official plan designation or anything like that, their use is still protected legally through a legal non-conforming status. So it's a situation where you have areas that can't have roosters, which is basically anywhere other than where you can have an agricultural use. And at that land use compatibility situation where you have the two differing land uses. The backyard chicken bylaw, if it's somebody has a rooster and it's a rural property and it's an agricultural use, the backyard chicken bylaw doesn't apply to this property, like wouldn't apply to the properties at all. And similarly in shoreline residential, you actually can't even have laying hens, right? It's not listed as one of the permitted zones of having backyard chickens, but the roosters are only permitted where an agricultural use would be permitted.
Claire?
Yeah, so I think it's something we need to get on the official plan, cleaning up these lots. As you're saying, it would be considered legal non-conforming until they don't have them anymore. Then they have to conform, correctly?
Until they don't have them anymore, or they like sort of demonstrate that the use is like the way that the legal non-conforming status works is you have to stop the use, but you still have to demonstrate a desire to continue the use.
Right.
So if you voluntarily demolish a building that's legal non-conforming and you can demonstrate that you intended to rebuild it for 5 years, you were slowly working on saving money or doing it, it becomes kind of a legal case. But yes, short story is if the rooster goes away, in theory, then the rooster would not be able to come back if it was restricted under current policy, if that use ceased to exist.
Perfect. All right.
So, and just if I could continue in terms of writing a report for changing it, it would just be a matter of sort of amending the zoning in these areas, doing sort of what our new official plan is stating is kind of giving that differentiation between a rural lot and a rural residential lot, which those wheels are already in motion. And then when a lot is created going forward in the rural area, they would be required to rezone it to something else, which could then in theory restrict certain uses within the rural zone while still protecting the right of the rural area. And that would be the best way forward. That being said, it's not going to make anything go away, but anything that's existing will continue, but it wouldn't get worse.
Correct. And I know some that are in Fountains Beach area. We had a good friend that had chickens 20 years ago. His lot is zoned agriculture. All the rest of them were shoreline residential. And there was like 2 or 3, one person had a horse. their lot was zoned depends on when they were severed. And there was 2 or 3 lots in that subdivision that were zoned agriculture. So yeah, it's something we need to clean up now that as we move forward.
So can you please confirm to me then, if you're going to be looking at changing from rural to rural residential, how those distinctions would be made and determinations would be made? Is it because of proximity to village residential, shoreline residential? Is it lot size? Like how would these designations, right? If we have somebody who lives in a rural area that is not a developed area, not future developed area, and they have a half acre or 1 acre lot surrounded by either rural or agricultural uses, would they then be rural residential? Or because of their proximity to other settlement areas, they wouldn't be even considered?
So that we just haven't got that far yet. So, so I have the foundational policy written into the official plan. And then when we do the zoning bylaw review, then we'll look at that because it is a fine balancing act, right? You want to make sure that you're not restricting people's ability to have a rural residential lot in a rural area to allow them to do more agriculturally related uses, but you still want to be mindful of land use compatibility as well. So that is something that we will be reviewing in the zoning bylaw update after the OP is adopted.
Are there any other questions? Okay, so the recommendation is that council receive report BP 3324 regarding agricultural uses in the township as information. All in favor? Through the zoning. Okay, so all in favor? And that is carried. Is there any unfinished or new business? Councillor Bell.
Thank you. How fortuitous that we're talking about roosters and chickens. My question is just for John Popple, if he can just answer this question, which he has done for me between he and I and one resident. We do have a very loud rooster in Lagoon City right now. And I had asked John if he could explain to me the process of, how it works when this happens. So I'm just asking if he can explain it to the public versus me doing one by one by one.
Not a problem, Councillor Bell, through the chair. So in instances where we receive complaints about chickens or roosters that are in a zone that are not permitted, obviously Lagoon City being one of those areas that prohibits both of those uses, we would attend a property, verify obviously that the roosters or the chickens are present. We would have a conversation with the property owner or tenant, advising them of the bylaw and that they're not permitted to keep them there on the property, giving them a verbal order to remove the chickens or the rooster. If they fail to comply with that verbal directive, we would serve formal notice under the zoning bylaw and that portion of the section that's specific to the backyard chickens for the non-compliance. And if they failed to comply with that notice, we would have to issue a summons to court for the zoning bylaw violation. We do not have the authority to go in and remove the chicken or the rooster or seize them. We do not have that authority to take the property, nor do we have a facility to house them if we were to remove them from the site. And then we would go through the court process and hopefully they would agree to compliance and remove the chicken and or be fined and obtain a court order for the removal of the animal at that point. So, which could take 3 to 6 months, unfortunately.
Right in time for Thanksgiving. Thank you. Is there any other new or unfinished business? Seeing none, I'll hand the chair back to you, Mayor.
Thank you. And now Protective Services, Councillor Bell.
Thank you. So there's just one item on the agenda today. It's 8.1 amendment of Schedule A of bylaw 2019.19 is amended, a bylaw to designate community safety zones in the Township of Ramara. Can somebody put that on the floor? Councillor Goff and Councillor Fisher. I guess, would it be Josh? Do you want to speak to this or CAO? Is it? Oh, Joe, you're doing it, John? Okay, geez. Well, it started out with former CAO, so I wasn't sure who to go to.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So the proposed amendments to the community safety zones is a part of the automated speed enforcement project that we're currently moving through the process with. In working with the supplier for automated speed enforcement, the heat maps and speed data obtained through our infrastructure department, we reviewed the current community safety zones and areas that we are seeing increased speed issues and or where there wasn't community safety zones presently. And these are the recommended additions to the community safety zones. In order to implement the automated speed enforcement in the township, it has to be within a community safety zone. We can't just post it on any road. So we need to implement these changes to beef up the areas that will be patrollable by the electronic signage or electronic devices.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it. And thank you for, this is great to see it moving forward. So it's very exciting news. So I know Councillor Goff.
I know you're talking about community safety zones. Have you looked at making, quote, Brecken proper, all the side streets, O'Neill Church, and a community safety zone as well? I know we have community safety zone from Highway 12 out Simcoe 4, or Concession Road 4, that area, but the side streets, because I met with residents on Friday of last week, and they still had concerns on that side of the highway, and on this side of the highway, apparently prior to 6 o'clock at night and the liquor store closing, that street there is quite crazy, with people trying to get there before it closes. I know on the other side of the Highway 12, when traffic is backed up, people are sort of bypassing this intersection. Can we amend this to include, quote, Brecken proper and the roads?
So to answer your first question through the chair, I have not looked at those additional areas. That was not part of our review. I don't believe we can expand it to all of those areas. I would ask for perhaps Josh's comment on the criteria for adding the community safety zones. But I don't necessarily, this was based fully on the speed data that we were receiving based on where we had placed that equipment to obtain those issues, or where equipment had been placed as a result of members of council reporting that there were speed issues or residents in certain areas. So I don't know if Josh, if you have anything you can add to that. Yeah, I'd have to look into it, Councillor Goth, to come back with a proper fulsome answer for you on what the criteria is, but this was fully based on the heat maps for speeding issues within the township.
Okay. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. So John, I know that you taking over this project is probably fairly recent, so I'm not sure how the conversations what you were involved with before Zach's departure. One of the questions I had for him, recognizing that the Monk Road is not ours, it's a county road, and the county has expended the area of 60 kilometers, knowing that at 80 kilometers we can't use these cameras as well. But the one thing I'd ask Zach to maybe look into was to talk to the county to see if they'd be willing to move the 60 sign a little bit further west of the general store, just to lengthen that area, because it now goes beyond almost to Young's Lake, as well as on the boundary roads there. Is a slower speed. And if there was an appetite from the county to include that as a community safety zone, of course, right there, it's very straight and it's quite dangerous, even though the speed limit's reduced and there's little enforcement from the police. So he was going to be looking into the county to see if there was an appetite to lengthen that, as well as to make it a community safety zone so that we would be able to deploy the cameras in that area. I don't know if that's something that has been taking place with you or not, but just as a thing.
We have had conversations with the county. They are very supportive of the project, specifically on 169 in the school zone, and adding the ability for enforcement through that area. So I believe that they would be open to additional areas on county roads. I've not had that specific conversation, so I will add it to my list when we formalize our agreement with the county for our enforcement to take place on their roadways.
That's great. Thank you. Because probably the largest and maybe only concern that I get from multiple residents in that area is the speed and the danger. Just wanting the ability to walk the 5 or 6 houses to the store as opposed to drive, and then even pulling out. I won't back out onto that road, even if it's the middle of the day with not a lot of traffic in that area. It is quite dangerous.
Thank you. Counselor to you.
Through the chair, thank you. To John Popple, thanks for that explanation that county is doing this somewhat separately than us, because I had noticed that County Road 169 in front of Rama Central School is not listed. But it is on the list to benefit from the speed cameras. Great. Okay, so my question is that, does a community safety zone require a sign on each street to be considered a community safety zone? Or is it implied that side streets, as Councillor Goff had indicated, are captured within the zone of a main street? So for example, just using my own street, would Davy Drive be considered to be within the community safety zone since it comes off Switch exactly in the middle of the community safety zone on that road?
So just having a quick discussion with Josh through the chair to Councillor Tu. It's kind of a gray area based on what Josh and I just discussed there. We would prefer to have, if it's passed under the bylaws, to have signage on those specific streets indicating that it is a community safety zone. It's kind of difficult for people to know that it is if it's just implied that that area is also a zone. So I would like to see signage go up in those areas, specifically if we're installing the camera in those zones. I think it's important that we're going to have the signage notifying individuals that coming soon will be a camera in this area. And then once they get the ticket, if it does go through the review process, if they challenge that ticket, we can also say that signage was in place demonstrating that this was a community safety zone, that they entered it and they were speeding.
Thank you. May I just follow up briefly? So from your response, would you then feel that it would be necessary to have one on Davy Drive, for example, or a side street within a zone that isn't where it isn't listed? Or
So for the community safety zone to be enforceable, the sign has to be on the physical road where the bylaw is. So Davy Drive, I don't believe it's currently on the listing for community safety zone, but Switch Road is. But Davy Drive is between the two signs, so it kind of gives the false impression that Davy Drive is under it, but it's actually not. It's kind of the same in Brecken here. But for it to be enforceable by the Highway Traffic Act, it has to be on the bylaw and it has to be signed.
thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Fisher.
Thanks. But a lot of the community safety zones that we're looking at today is specifically for the speed camera placement. So if we were to take the speed camera off of Switch Road to put it onto Davy Drive, to make it wouldn't happen. It would be on Switch Road anyway, regardless if Davy Drive is within the community safety zone, right?
So the cameras cannot go on roads that do not have community safety zones.
Right. Would Davy Drive be a road that or as an example, I'm not trying to pick on your road, but if we are capturing the entrance to Davy Drive from both ends within a community safety zone, the camera would be in that area. And if people are speeding on Davy Drive, they're probably speeding on Switch Road too. Or you're missing everyone on Switch Road because they're not all turning up Davy Drive, right? So
typically with Davy Drive being a dead end, you will get some of the speeds, but not to the same degree that you would on Switch Road. If someone were to contest their ticket with the cameras on Davy Drive, they would win because Davy Drive is not a part of our bylaw to be within the community safety zone.
oh no, I recognize that. That's what I mean. Like by putting one of the arterial roads onto a community safety zone that we may or may not be putting the cameras on, would that be considered redundant? If we're not going to be putting the cameras on a road like Davy Drive anyway, it would most likely be staying on Switch.
Yes.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing around the table is, I guess I'll pose a question. When was the last time we reviewed community safety zones? And then is it necessary to do a review of community safety zones to determine whether we are missing some streets or whether there's different pockets around the township that have been overlooked? Like, I'm not sure when it was last done.
So through you, that is what our contractor did, is they reviewed all of the information and data and current community safety zones. And these were the only ones that were recommended to be added, plus a few housekeeping amendments because we've had some road name changes based on that. We had to change the zones that they were active in.
Okay, that's what I thought happened, but I just kind of wanted to confirm that. And I guess there was one other question posed to me, which was, does a community safety zone necessitate a certain speed? So for example, because it's a community safety zone, does it have to be 40 or does it have to be 50? Or is there, what is the range of speeds that are permitted within a community safety zone?
I believe the maximum speed within community safety zone is 60. So, and it's always double the fines within a community safety zone. But I don't believe it's double the points or anything. So the maximum speed within a zone is 60, but typically you see it 40, 50, upwards of 60, but not typically 60 too often.
Thank you. And then just so it's stated, your determination on whether it is going to be a 60, a 50, or a 40, that's what's coming from your radar speed data or your reporting from OPP.
Yeah, correct. We typically look at the 85th percentile of the data we get from those speed cameras.
Thank you. I think Councillor Tuyu has one more question.
Yes, since the whole issue of community safety zones is pertaining to the automatic safety enforcement that we're trying to implement, residents have been asking me about the timeline for implementing the speed cameras. Do you know when we're going to approximately be able to get started on this?
Thank you for the question through the chair. So we were waiting on another municipality to enter into an agreement with the Ministry of Transportation to becoming a regional processing center, because we didn't have the ability here to take on that role. It would have been financially unattainable for the township. So the Township of Essa is now fully have the agreements in place with the proper ministries. So in addition to running their own program, they have the ability to take on other municipalities. So we're in the process of finalizing the agreement with them, the county, the Ministry of Transportation, and the Ministry of Attorney General for the enforcement piece. So I'm hopeful by before Christmas that we would have this implemented and ready to go.
Perfect. Thank you. I think that's probably pretty much covers all the discussion. So the recommendation is that Schedule A of Bylaw 2019.19 is amended, be further amended to designate Whitney Road and Orkney Beach Road as community safety zones in accordance with Section 4.1 of Bylaw 2019.19 as amended, and that the community safety zone for Cortlandt Street and Lily Point Road be updated on Schedule A of Bylaw 2019.19 as amended due to the street name changes. All in favor? Thank you. Is there any unfinished or new business? Councillor Tuyu.
Thank you. Through the chair to John Popple again, I have been noticing golf carts on our municipal roads, usually driven by young children. Yesterday, I spoke to somebody who witnessed what appeared to be a 7-year-old driving a pair of 5-year-olds in a golf cart through Floral Park, quite dangerously, by hard braking, causing occupants to be lurching around inside the cart, in addition to sharing the road with regular vehicles. Is this something that can be addressed under municipal purview, or is this an OPP issue?
Through the chair, we've had this same issue in Lagoon City previously. This is an OPP matter. So golf carts are not a permitted vehicle on a municipal or Ontario roadway. They are not insured, they're not licensed, and there's no requirement for a driver's license. So they are not permitted. So please report those incidences to the OPP, either through 1-888-310-1122 or through their report of concern form found on their website, and they'll dispatch an officer when available.
Thank you.
I would just add, if it's a dangerous situation, if they're in and out of, then that should be responded to immediately, especially if there's a 7 or a 5-year-old driving, and you may want to consider then the emergency line at that point for something that serious.
Thank you, John. I think one thing too, I would just add, just while we're on the topic, it's ATVs or UTVs or whatever, they have to be licensed as well. So they fall into the same category, because I'm having an issue with that as well right now. And then finally, just one tiny little note, which is, again, just with the reporting, there was a time period where OPP itself, I know they've had changeover of staff, and there had been some confusing information out, which said, oh, but you can drive on shoulders. So I think I just want to say that, no, you can't. So just while we're talking about it, just as the information is going to get circulated again, likely through the highlights, yeah, it's not permissible at all. So yeah, definitely reporting. And then back to you, Mayor.
Okay, we should break for lunch till 1 o'clock. Is that
We've advertised our council meeting to start at 1, so we'll have to post something that'll be.
All right, so do you think we can fly? All right, we will carry on with transportation services. Councillor Goff.
Could I just interrupt for 1 second? Could we just make an amendment to the agenda? Because it still says me as the liaison.
Oh,
I just noticed
Can
that.
we correct? No, I've got it, Councillor Goff.
Oh, I still have
So,
it as mine.
all right, if you update, it'd probably disappear.
If you want to continue, it's okay. This is my first time since being back on council. So we have 4 items on the agenda. First one is item 9.1, stop sign best practices and options at intersections. Recommendation that report ID 36-24 be received by council and that the OPP be requested to enforce existing stop signs. Have somebody put that on the floor, Councillor to you and Councillor Fisher. Josh, it's pretty self-explanatory, but I don't know if you want to add anything or we can take questions from the members of council.
No, if there's questions, I can answer, yeah, for sure.
Councillor to you.
Thank you. Through the chair, thanks, Josh, for illustrating all the options and possibilities and their associated prices and general effectiveness. For the intersection specifically of Cortland and Balsam, have you heard anything back about those two-way tabs that we were waiting on that would be affixed to the stop signs on Cortland? I think both these signs would benefit from a flashing red light, but I think the really critical part of that intersection is keeping that northeast corner completely clear of trees and brush. This is exactly what the residents think is the root of the problem, since the visibility is usually not that great. Oh, and I guess my question on that is, yes, considering that that is a vacant and unmaintained farm lot, can your crew try to maintain that corner more than twice per year for safety reasons? And also the update on the two-way tabs.
So yeah, great questions. Two-way tabs were installed about 2 weeks ago, so they should be up. If they're not, I'll have to find out where they are because I know we've gotten them. As far as sight lines on that corner, we do have some allowances to go on private property for sight lines, but they are still somewhat limited. I know we have gone in the property a little bit to open it up as much as we can to try and get the equipment there on a regular basis, as well as maintain everything in the entire township. We do our best to get there at least twice a year. The roadside mowing, as it's coming up in a later report, 7 feet from basically edge of pavement is cut twice a year. We typically try to brush with the big brusher machines once a year, just because we get over the entire township, but we can try to get there as often as we can to keep it clear.
Thanks.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Councillor Goff. I just want to double check on Laguna and Poplar. So I know that you spoke about, I was trying to look for the regulation. So Ontario Traffic Manual Book 5, and you had said that the oversized stop sign is already too big. And so then we left the way the report's leaving it is that it's just status quo. And I guess my question is this. So we already didn't follow the manual when we put up the oversized stop sign. So why can't we not follow the manual and put in the flashing lights? I'm just trying to kind of paraphrase what residents' questions to me are. So what they're saying is, well, we already broke the rule anyway, so why don't we break a different rule and go for the flashing light?
So the issue with not following what the guidelines are, you're taking that emphasis away from intersections where there is a major concern. High-speed intersections with curves that make it kind of blind. The intersection Lagoon City, in my opinion, it's behavioral. It's a clear, open intersection. You can kind of see what's coming, what's not. No matter what you put there, if you put extra signage, oversized signage, lights, speed bumps, it's a behavioral issue, in my opinion. You can put as much there as you want. It's not going to fix anything. People are still going to run those stop signs. The biggest way to get people to start stopping is get the police there, start ticketing more often. red light cameras, I don't know, stuff like that, but a lot of that comes with all additional expenses as well, so. We could put signage there, we could put lights there, but it does go against that book 5 because you want to try to keep those special tools in the toolkit for intersections that absolutely need them, where there's a high accident rate. I don't know of any accidents that have occurred in this intersection. I don't know if you guys have that data. I can double check with our fire department, read with PP. But I'm not aware of any accidents that have occurred there. It's just people running the stop sign, which is against the Highway Traffic Act, and it's a behavioral issue.
Councillor Bell, follow.
Thank you. I appreciate you reiterating reporting to the police, because that's sort of my song that I never stop singing. And again, it's just that idea. People are afraid to call the police when it's non-emergent. So it's just getting the information out there that says, you know, please do call, because that's what drives our patrols, and also in a way that we don't spend more money. Because if we look for an officer to assign there, we have to pay for it. So I appreciate that. And then I guess my question would be, if a community wanted to purchase the radar speed sign and have it permanently affixed on Laguna Parkway, can they? I guess, and I'm not sure who knows that answer, but if that's what the community wanted to do, that would slow down the traffic on Laguna Parkway.
We'd have to look at it. The issue then, when they want it moved within that community, it becomes very difficult. There's the liability issues with it as well, and if it gets damaged, or who's liable for it, all that kind of stuff. So, with you mentioning the OPP and people are afraid to call, there is a lot of non-emergency lines. Star OPP is non-emergency. There's a report of concern on their website. There's the number John gave earlier, the 1-888 1122 310 tips or whatever. We'd have to look more into, is it just the speed sign or the red flash and light? Because if it goes against book 5, I wouldn't want residents to purchase it just to circumvent that we're not recommending it.
I think in this case, it was just because it is effective when you have the flashing, capturing their speed. And that typically tends to slow people down. And I think that's maybe what people were wondering, is that a possibility?
But we've had them on Laguna. We've had that speed sign on Laguna, especially when we were hauling. Because there's the calls from the residents with concerns of the trucks speeding. When we had that equipment up, it didn't show that there was no speeding. And the signs can actually be manipulated in ways that it doesn't show your speed, and people think it's not working. But I'm still getting the data for it. And with it presenting that it's not working versus when it is working, there was no difference in the speeds associated with it either.
So I know at one time we did have a resident who, when we had the signs on Laguna Parkway or anywhere else in the municipality, said she sped up as fast as she could go because she wanted to see the number on.
And that's why we set the
there,
maximum speeds on it, so it doesn't act in that manner. I can shut the speeds off at certain amounts. That way you can't see if you can get your record.
Any further questions? Councillor, to you.
Thank you. Through the chair to Josh. So when it says here that the OPP are to be requested to enforce existing stop signs, do you know what that kind of enforcement is going to look like in terms of how often they'll be there? Or are we going to have like an intensive period to sort of create that reputation for people that they should slow down?
And I'm not sure what the OPP schedule would be like. I know the more reports they get of certain areas, the more patrols they will assign to those areas. So the best recommendation would be, if you're in the area and you see the concerns, to call it in or email it in. With our policing committee as well here, we can make recommendations to there for them to bring forward to the OPP as well. So.
Okay, we pretty well beat that one around. Pretty good. All in favor? That is passed. Next item on the agenda is 9.2 grass and bush maintenance and municipal road allowance. Recommendation that report ID -38-24 be received as information. Can I have somebody put that on the floor for me? Councillor Bell and the deputy mayor. Discussion. Councillor Bell.
Thank you. So I think, so this report is just telling us what roadside brushing is. And that what I had been looking for back on February 26th was actually how to solve the problem of uncut. So there's a difference between rural areas and then shoreline or village residential or hamlet areas, right? So what we experience along Lakeshore from Lagoon City down to Beaverton area and probably the other way too, going north. You have X number of lots that cut their grass all the way up to the roadside and then X number who don't. And so the discussion had been around how do we change things such that we can compel those property owners to clean up the sides of the road, because why would I as a homeowner and I cut my grass be charged as a general taxpayer for grass cutting on somebody else's property just because they didn't do it. And I know that initially when we talked about this, you had spoken of the responsibility of the municipality to do roadside cutting. So I think this question is not necessarily infrastructure related, but has more to do with how things are zoned, or what is permissible within certain zones. So if you lived in a city, you automatically have to cut your boulevard. It's not optional. Like those are, and I've gone in and looked for some different bylaws to see how that works. So, because what's happening is as a result of the uncut grass on the sides of the roadways, cars that are parking, and then this leads into our whole parking strategy, right? Because now if the grass is uncut, the cars just park on the road. And so that's part of the reason why we've needed to have a parking strategy along the lakeshore, because we have pedestrians forced out into the roadway. So I think I was looking for more of a solution than a description of what we do, but how can we solve the problem in our residentially zoned areas so that people are cutting the grass? And I yesterday just watched a fellow down with his weed eater cleaning up along the side of the road. So it's not that it can't be done. And so I'm looking for a way for us to implement a program that says you need to take care of your property if you're in a residential area.
So Councillor Bell, would you like to put a motion forward under new business moving forward? And we're just receiving this as how it's done now?
Yeah, I can do. Sure.
Any other discussion, questions? All in favor? That is passed. Next item on the agenda. Oh, and I know Councillor Bell is going to talk about this. 9.3, public engagement proposal, Lake Avenue parking lot. Recommendation that receive report ID 44-24 as information that staff install the proposed sign at the site and create an online public consultation campaign from August 1st to September 1st, 2024. Can I have somebody move that, please? Councillor Fisher and the mayor. Any discussion?
I feel like I can't be quiet today. So I guess, I mean, when I brought this conversation, or when Josh and I first talked about this conversation, there were a couple of different issues that even had us start to talk about it. So number one was the safety issues on Simcoe Road during winter time with ice fishing. And then the second one was the parking all along Poplar, parking on both sides of the road. And then recently we had a lot of conversation about parking in the cul-de-sac, safety, whether fire and emergency services can properly access those properties, trespass onto those properties. And I know that Council all received an email from a resident yesterday, but just to kind of sum up his take on the issues is that the area can't accommodate a large number of visitors, which, I mean, we know what size that small tiny park is, so it clearly can't accommodate thousands of visitors. The concern that the area is not being used by residents of Ramara Township, and he is illustrating that in his email, but I can tell you that I've received a number of calls from people in and outside of Lagoon City who were excited when we finished grading the beach and they said, wow, there's a beach, there's a park, I can't wait to take my grandchildren there, and then couldn't. So we have got this very few beach and park spaces for residents to access to start with. And now we've got this area, but they can't get to it because they can't park their car. So, I mean, we have to take care of our residents first.
Are we okay with what is proposed?
No.
With the engagement?
No.
No?
No, I have my own take on what I think the engagement should look like. So that was why I asked to have this deferred when I wasn't going to be here to speak to it. So I sent Ashley a picture actually, is I drew the parking lot to the best of my ability with the tools I had available. So the concern with the engagement out of the gate was that the feedback I got was, so you're paving the entire whole parking area or park area. So they thought that we were going to pave everything between Lake and Poplar in that whole area. And that's not what was being, at least not being proposed by me. So what I was hoping was going to happen was that the parking lot would be constructed, and then in the parking lot, we would have designated spaces. So you might have your 5 for your 15-minute parking to access the mailboxes. You would have X percentage for visitors and X percentage for Ramara residents with their parking passes, which would ensure that residents can access that park and beach space. It would also take the cars off of Poplar. And then in the wintertime, it would take them off of Simcoe Road. So those are the pieces. And then the thing that I didn't draw yet was bollards on the park areas. Because one of the other issues that's occurring is vehicles are accessing that park area and parking all over the grass. And also on the beach side, they're entering now through the missing bollard. And since we graded, are driving through the beach and down to the beach in vehicles or through the park and down to the beach. So I'm looking for a
so
different community
this
engagement.
is your proposal. But basically all we're trying to do is figure out if we're going to expand it and hear from the public right now.
Right. And the
So
community
I
engagement.
think this right now is we're dealing with this at a later date, Councillor Bell, when it actually comes to public engagement and we get a response back. That's when this can be
But
addressed.
that's what I'm asking for. I want the public engagement to include what would happen. Right now, we have a note with a big square.
Yeah.
And that has created an incredible amount of upset in the community. So they want to understand what is our intent for the parking lot. So doing the engagement isn't just saying, oh, we want to pave this. What do you think? The engagement needs to say, this is what we're proposing. What do you think? So what I'm asking for is the engagement to go out in a manner that lets the community know what we're proposing. Because right now, the report, all it did so far was create quite a bit of fear. And there's residents, particularly in that area, obviously, who are really concerned that all we're going to do is pave this whole thing and there's going to be no controls and who's going to monitor who's parking where, and how does it solve the problem is the bottom line. So when we do community engagement, to just go out and say, we want to know if you want us to pave the parking lot, that's not really engagement. The residents need to understand what is our proposal. What are we asking them to vote on?
I don't know exactly what we are asking them yet.
Exactly. So
Right?
let's figure that
we're
out.
Waiting for response from the public.
But we can't get a response because we haven't asked them a question.
Well, we're saying we want to hear from you. We're
On what,
asking for
though?
Public feedback on proposed parking lot expansion.
But we didn't propose
We'll get it.
anything.
Josh,
So,
Mr. Mayor.
We're proposing a parking lot. That's it. We haven't designed it yet. There's no final design. There's nothing. We're proposing a parking lot. So we're asking the public, do you object to a parking lot? That's where we're at. After, if council decides to go ahead with a parking lot, now we'll go to the final design stage. Then we'll have the plan, the layout, and council will vote on whether they like or do not like the final layout. Right now, we're proposing a parking lot. That's it. That's all we have. We haven't designed it. We're not going to design it if we're not going to build it. We're not going to spend money designing it if we're not going to build it. It's a parking lot.
Josh,
yeah, so quickly, this was the sign we were proposing to put up. It is, the area is similar to the area that you had. We just didn't show the parking spots, whatnot. And then the previous page in the report, basically, it has the criteria of what we're looking for the public engagement. So name, address, phone numbers, if you're in favor of a parking lot, if you're not in favor, what would you like to see used in the area? We're basically looking for information to proceed one way or another. If we put a parking lot there, or if nobody wants parking lot, maybe we could look, I know dog parks come up. We could maybe incorporate a dog park in a little corner there. At this point, it's just preliminary. We're looking for information in the area. We know we have a parking issue. And the parking lot was a way to try to mitigate those issues that we have on some of the other streets. It's conceptual at this point. We haven't spent any time looking at how many spots we can put in there or how to designate the spots, whatnot. That would come later on after we know that people want a parking lot there.
So putting out engagement right now that just says, do you want a parking lot? I will already tell you the answer is no. So then we haven't solved the problem. We're still going to have cars all over Poplar. We're still going to have trespass. We're still going to have cars all over Simcoe Road. So I think that we're having a misunderstanding about what community engagement means. So like to just go out and say, do you want a parking lot? Yes or no. That's not really engagement, but to go out and say, here's our proposal. Do you like the proposal or not is community engagement. So
We're asking for public feedback on a proposed parking lot expansion.
So I can already tell you the answer is no. Based on that community engagement, the answer is no, and we haven't solved the problem. So we're not getting any further ahead. We're going to be
Councilor
another
Bell,
year.
I'm not gonna keep on arguing back and forth. CEO done.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I believe the report that's before you was based on direction from council to ensure that there was a sign that announced the intent of going forward. That was the direction of council. If there was a broader approach that needed to be taken regarding engagement, I thought that the first step was to determine if this was going to go, because as I recall, Mr. Kavanaugh, the determination by council was not certain that we're going to go. So the amount of investment in teasing all this out with a plan, with a broad community engagement process, if there's no appetite to even see this moving forward, I believe that Mr. Kavanaugh is following the direction of council. I certainly understand what Councillor Bell is saying, that, you know, from her perspective, from the residents' perspective, there needs to be a broader approach. But I think, Mr. Kavanaugh, you're correct in what you've done and brought back a report to council following up on the direction. It sounds like to me, Mr. Chairman, that Councillor Bell believes there's still a gap based on what is before council or committee.
Okay, I'm gonna call for the vote. I think we've had enough.
Okay, but Joe, it's my community. Like why can't we
it's
just,
everybody's
it's my community, right? But listen to me, please. Like you're just dismissing what I'm saying.
No, I'm not.
I'm the one that asked for the
Councillor
report.
Bell?
I asked for the report. So I would know what I was expecting to be in the report.
We're moving forward.
Okay, so there'll be no parking lot and we haven't solved the problem. I don't know why I
All in
can't.
favor of the motion as it's read? That is passed.
Thank you. Then I'm going to have to ask for that to be pulled because I can't support that the way that it's done.
Next item on the agenda is item 9.4, infrastructure grader repairs. Recommendation that report ID 4924 be received and that council approve the required repairs to the grader and that the grader be replaced as soon as possible. Can I have somebody move that, please? The deputy mayor and the mayor.
Comment on it. I assume we're just going to do the $36,000 repair and move forward, because am I reading this right? They're only giving us 20,000 for the grader on a trade-in?
That was my estimate. I haven't got the trading value from it yet.
Yeah, because we're actually spending more on it than they're giving us.
Yeah.
So I personally, I would say repair it and replace it when it's scheduled to be replaced. Let's try and get 2 years out of it, because we're spending more on the repair than they're going to give us for the machine. It's worth the gamble to go or don't repair it and just get rid of it, because to spend 36,000 to chase 20, fix it and use it and replace it when it's scheduled to be replaced.
I was hoping to have the trade-in value,
Yeah.
but I don't have it yet. The one thing that's kind of come up after I wrote this report, the recommendation to change the filters on a regular basis, weekly, if not monthly. Those filters are $600 per change.
Yeah.
So if we go 2 years, if we're doing weekly, that's 52 weeks times $600 times 24 months or for a 2 year period. So it all adds up that way.
I would do them at 50 hours and then annually. you're gonna get the stuff, a little bit of a grinding in a cylinder, the most it's gonna do is cause a leak in the cylinder. You'll take a seal out and they're not expensive.
Yeah,
So
the other issue with doing a $36,000 repair, it'll work, it'll get it operational. But with how finite the hydraulics are within the graders, if something else were to go because of the way the failure happened, it's gonna be back in. And typically, right now, we're getting everything ready for fall grading. And then we'll have downtime with this machine and then we'll be back into it with spring grading after that. So my concern is if we do the minimal repair and it goes down, we're gonna be down a grader for who knows how long. The more expensive repair, that estimate was based on an excavator where there's not really as many hydraulics on it. It could be upwards $250,000, and at that point, you're half the price of the machine. So it makes more sense to replace the machine at that point. My concern is I don't want to be down that machine because graders aren't the easiest to come across typically. If we were to replace the machine, we kind of lucked out at this point because there is one available within Ontario right now. And with the proposed finances to support the purchase of the machine, we did have those two bridges I was proposing to use that money for, and then move those bridge work to 2026, just move the grader ahead 2 years. Because to do those bridges, we've kind of missed the window, especially with school going back, because they're single lane bridges that essentially we need to close access to on one side of the bridge. We almost have to do it in the summer just because of schooling and everything like that to minimize the impact on the residents.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Bill.
Yeah, can we defer this? I think we need to have a price on that machine, a true replacement, so what we can get in for trade-in value before we make a call on that.
If I get a price before the end of the day, can I do an update? at council?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna amend that motion to defer it. Until we. Is that okay? Wake up. No.
Mr.
We are
Chairman?
going to amend the
Wait.
motion to defer it.
Joe,
So
Councilor.
I have another suggestion, Mr. Chairman, if I may. Proceed with the repair if it's less than the cost of the trade-in. And then, if the trade-in's 40,000, the repair is 36, then go ahead and repair it. We have the machine to use now and we're not out money.
are we looking at replacing it?
Would that work and then replace it ahead of schedule?
Well, if we're ahead of schedule, it'd be next year.
Yes,
So
but it wouldn't do the repair if the trade-in cost won't
Oh.
cover the repair.
Yeah. It's fine.
Are the mover and seconder?
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay, all in favor? That is carried. Any newer unfinished business? Seeing none, back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so we've announced that we're gonna have our council meeting at 1, is it? Okay, Dave, did you want to pull the mosquito one or are you fine till the final report comes in? Did you want a separate vote on that?
No.
You're fine till the final report comes in next month. All right. Okay, so we're just pulling 2 sections now. So we'll have A, B, and C.
There'll be section A, section B, and section C.
Perfect. So I will now look for motion to adjourn at 12:45 PM. Moved by Deputy Mayor, second by Councillor Fisher. There. All in favor, carried.